Hello everyone, and welcome to Tabletop Obscura presents Pathfinder, War of Immortals, the class playtest, where we're probably going to be sitting down and talking about the Animist and Exmplar. I'm not sure if I should dial back the energy or not. I'm kind of feeling the vibe though. And, as is usual, I've done this like twice, but it's happened twice, and it's kind of weird. But Dan has agreed to join me once again for talking about this stuff.
It's not what's the Gravity Falls mean? It's like it's weird that I've got $2. It's weird that's happened twice or whatever it is.
I don't know.
That's what it is.
We could just keep counting pennies. I don't mind.
Well, to be fair, that's how much you're paying me for this, so I can't complain.
Well, yeah, no one in this industry makes money. I don't think.
No, it's desperate times call for desperate measures and all that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you can get pretty far with bribery, I feel.
It's a light bit of bribery.
A light bit of bribery. But, for those of you who are just joining us, and is unfamiliar with Dan, DanTalksGames is over on Twitter for the most part, and he often has how would you put it?
Look, I like to think they're informed and valuable gaming opinions.
Yes.
Whether or not that's what people think they are. Look, it's got me over 1,000 followers with no other major social media presence, so I must be doing something right.
Right?
Yeah, but also, as we mentioned last time on stream, I am also one of the contributors for Sinclair's Library. That's my sort of professional link to the Tabletop Obscura brand, I guess.
And there's one or two things we're working on in the background together, but that's mostly just for fun.
Yeah, exactly. We do a lot of things. We got ideas.
We do. We have ideas and we have concepts.
Constantly cooking, recipes in the background that we'd love to get baked and show to people sometime, but that's in the distant future. In the meantime, we've got actual things that Paizo has prepared earlier to show.
Yeah, War of the Immortals. I mean, before we actually jump into the classes, because we both have put some time in with the classes and, gone through the designs, and I believe both of us have had the opportunity to play the Animist now?
Yeah, so I managed to get a game at my local Pathfinder Society store, Imaginary Adventures, and yeah, I managed to actually get a go at the Animist last night during one of our sessions. So that was a level... I managed to play that at level 5. What did you get yours done at, Matt?
Well, I was at my local Pathfinder Society as well, and I played a level 1 Animist.
Yeah, so it's a good spread. You sort of got the grand level, whereas I've got the sort of a little bit more into the game sort of viewpoint. So... I actually really like level 5, just as a level in Pathfinder, it's I feel once you sort of get to that point, you really feel like your build's starting to come online, and you get that nice diversity of and that sort of overall view of what the class is capable of outside those early few levels where it's a bit more limited. So I think that was a very good level to playtest that at and get a feel for what we can expect from the class as a bigger picture.
Well, we also... level 5, you also have the opportunity to pick up a couple of skill feats and some general stuff. And your character has a bit more breadth to them than just, the class that they have.
That's exactly true, too. And I will say, the playtests were a little bit limited because they do kind of force you to just... You're not allowed to multi-class or anything. You have to stick to... the Pathfinder Society will say when you're playtesting, you have to stick to the core class and only pick up class feats from it. But it's still enough to give you a good picture of sort of what the class is. At least I felt it certainly did in the case of Animist.
Yeah. Well, like I said, before we jump into it, though, the title for this class playtest in general is kind of evocative. And Paizo has been very shy, shall we say, about more information about it, and I know that's because we're not expecting anything until August next year.
I think it's winter next year. Yeah, I think this one's late because the August release is going to be Core 2. I'm pretty sure for
Core 2,
remaster,
and we got Call of the Wild coming out somewhere around there as well.
which I'm very excited about that one as well, because that's got some very dope races that are ancestries that are coming out in that one.
Why couldn't they have a playtest for that? I want to see what they're doing for the large size ancestries.
Yeah, I want to see the Minotaurs. I want to see all the animals we're going to be getting.
The Centaurs.
Yeah, oh, that's right. Centaurs are in there as well. Yeah, it's good. But yeah, so this one's going to be a bit of a wait, from what I can tell. But just the teaser from this playtest document has been very interesting, because it's confirmed. Obviously, so for people who haven't been following a lot of the stuff, Paizo was sort of teasing that this book is basically going to be it's going to be a bit of a world-shaking precedent for the official setting of Golarion. There's going to be some massive shakeups. Perhaps the biggest one, lore-wise, being there's going to be one of the primary deities is going to be killed off.
Yeah, so Dr. Cooler is safe.
Yeah, I was going to say they they haven't dropped any hints as to who it is, and obviously a lot of the lore freaks are getting very very antsy about that. They're like, "Oh, who is it going to be?" But in terms of the actual play test stuff we got here, obviously got the two classes, but one of the things it actually mentions that is quite interesting is that they've confirmed mythic options.
Yes.
Which has been a big ask for a lot of people, so we're finally getting that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition after its inclusion in Pathfinder 1st Edition, in particular of note in the very well-known Wrath of the Righteous adventure path, which was also made into a video game.
Which, yeah. The Mythic rules, I never got to tinker too much with the Mythic rules in Pathfinder 1. I know they were very popular, especially with some groups. But yeah, from what I read of them, because I did try for one campaign to use the Mythic rules, but it became a little bit too much for both myself and my players at the time. Because it was just an extra step on everything else like that, and I had a bunch of new players. It was just a little bit much.
It's also not like Pathfinder 1st Edition needed much in terms of power boosts. It's like we said last time, the power caps in that game was so ridiculous on their own that Mythic was kind of just cranking it up to 20 from 11.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we want to play beyond level 20. Okay, I'll just give you Mythic levels. How about that? Excellent.
Yeah, but I'm going to be
crazy with it.
Yeah, I'm going to be very curious to see how they do this one, because obviously one of the big things with 2nd Edition has been trying to make sure that the power caps are a bit more balanced.
Yeah.
So whether or not that means they're going to throw that out and say if you're playing Mythic, you're going to have high power caps, or if it's just going to be Mythic aesthetic but keep the more bounded gameplay, that's when I'm going to be interested to see what happens.
Yeah, because there's a couple of ways that they could cut it. One that I was considering earlier is that they could have it as a an optional rule, kind of how we have the free archetype optional rule at the moment. But instead of having a free archetype, you get your Mythic stuff instead.
I figure that's what they're probably going to do, because the free archetype rule is already a very good chassis for that, and replicates a lot of what that 1st Edition Mythic ruling did, which is it just slaps extra advancements on top of your existing ones. So I'm sure that's what it's going to be like. Whether it's going to overlap with free archetype and can be used in conjunction with it, or if it's just going to be a flat out, this is just a free archetype where you just get some super powerful stuff. They've released nothing about it. They've just told us that
it's happening.
It's happening!
So the other thing I really wanted to point out is the fact that in the playtest, they're calling it a source book, yeah?
Yeah.
But, from what we know about it, it's also sounding like an adventure path. So, are we getting both?
I mean, Paizo have been doing a very good job over the past, since 2nd Edition's release, of sort of synchronizing the releases with adventure paths.
Yes.
So it's obviously we had Secrets of Magic, which came out around the time, that so I can't remember. It's around the time Strength of Thousands, and then we had Outlaws of Alkenstar, Time with Guns and Gears. We're getting the new the Mwangi Expanse book, of course, at that time with Strength of Thousands. Dark Archive, we're getting things like Stolen Fates, which has a really big link to that sort of esoterica and tarot card stuff.
Yeah, and we also had Gatewalkers, which is
Gatewalkers. Yeah, exactly, which is a very similar thing. I don't know much about Gatewalkers apart from the fact it's Dwarven themed, apparently. I didn't really look into it too much.
No, that's Sky King's throne.
I'm getting my adventure paths confused. Don't listen to me, people.
Look. They release a new adventure book every month. And at the moment, I think we're getting like 3 to 4 full adventure paths a year. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot going on. And like, it's interesting because they're definitely playing around with the format a lot more than they were in first edition. Like, they're doing a lot more of a janky spread of leveling, which we discussed last time. Actually, I said I was quite happy to see that because I think the game is one that is better when you decide what spread of leveling you're doing, rather than just assuming 1 to 20 for everything.
Yes. And as my experience as a streaming GM, because most of my games are streamed now, being able to sit down with my players and go, this adventure path goes from levels 1 to level 10. So it'll take us about a year to finish, and then, we can go our separate ways or do other stuff. And a lot of players really appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what you want to do, yeah, because at the sort of going for those long form adventures, it's always nice, but you kind of want to have an end date, because otherwise it does meander a bit, I find.
Yes. And I ran Agents of Edgewatch from level 1 to level 20. And it was a fun experience. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
But, oh god, it was so long.
Yeah, and I think we had this discussion too, Agents of Edgewatch, it was not a great campaign to do from 1 to 20. It really, it sort of felt like a need to, stay in the beat cop sort of power level, but because it went to level 20, it had to get to that mythic level that, a lot of the higher level adventures did. And it's kind of it thematically doesn't seem like it's suited for that.
No. And I think we said this, level 1 to 10 would have been great. Would have been fantastic. Quick, concise, you get the ideas and the themes across, it'd be beautiful. Didn't happen, but what can you do?
Exactly. But yeah, so the long and short of it is, I reckon we're going to be getting a tie-in adventure for this one. I don't think it's going to be a standalone source book. I mean, sorry, it is going to be a standalone source book, but I don't think it's going to include the adventure so much as it's just going to tie into the happenings that are going on at the same time in the story. And I expect a lot of the Pathfinder Society stuff too, because that always ties in with it as well. I reckon that's going to come into it.
Well, we know that recently with Starfinder, they did the Drift Crisis.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like this evolving narrative where they've got an adventure path that goes along with it, but it's also this... they had a source book that came with it, where it's the drift is gone now, so let's kind of travel out there with more regular space travel and see what we can do. So you think they're going to do something like that?
I mean, that's my read on it. And going by what they've had, this may be... I mean, on the other hand, this is a fairly big precedent where they're sort of saying this is a really big earth-shattering epoch for the setting. And a lot of the other books, for all the fact they tie into a lot of current events they're talking about in the world of Golarion, this is probably the most overt where they're saying this one's a big deal. Yeah. I think the last biggest one, I mean, Rage of Elements sort of had that with the return of the elemental planes of wood and metal, but that was also as much an excuse to mechanically bring those things into the game as it was a story event. This one is just literally we're throwing a wrench in things. We're shaking up the Pantheon. This is going to have ramifications around the world. Obviously, a big deal, particularly with the Exmplar as a class, is that sort of, that spark of divinity is being spread around the world. So that's going to have an impact on things. How it's going to play out, obviously Paizo knows, but they're keeping mum about it. So all we can do is speculate.
And one of my other speculations about it is this is the divine source book that we've been looking for a very long time. Because we had Secrets of Magic, which was very much... It covered all the bases, but it was very much arcane stuff. Then we had Dark Archive, which is for the occult. Rage of Elements was for primal. I think this is going to be the divine book we've been waiting for.
I agree, and it seems to be... I agree with that. That's sort of been the pattern going forward the past few years.
Yeah.
And I think this is the divine book. That's also got me... a little bit, I don't want to say concerned, but that's why I'm sort of a little bit sort of invested in how these classes turn out, because there's been some ideas and archetypes for divine classes I've been really wanting to see added to the game.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I will say Animist, I think, is one that's been very popular, the idea of sort of that spirit wielding class, and again, we'll sort of touch on that when we get to it. Exemplar, I have some thoughts on, a lot of thoughts on. That's the one I think I'm going to be spending the most time sort of grokking out in this one. But to me, it's basically saying, well, this is going to be the big push for divine classes for the next couple of years. So I really want to see it done right, because otherwise it's going to be like another 4 to 5 years before we sort of get to revisiting these concepts.
Well, if it is the divine book, it means that they're going to be revisiting, because with the remaster update, we're of course probably going to get the new readouts for the gods.
Yeah.
And one of those is going to be dying, so rip every player who kind of selects that as their god with the remaster.
I know, right?
But I get the feeling it's going to be very much gods and magic, like Lost Omens, gods and magic plus. But I'm hoping they have a lot more support for the cleric and the champion. That said, we don't know what the remaster cleric and champion are going to look like at this point.
We've got
anyway.
Yeah, well, we got snippets of the cleric as we discussed last time. We were looking over the preview, but yeah, I mean, this is, I will say, one of the things I'm finding quite interesting about this period of Pathfinder 2nd Edition's life is I feel like they're definitely getting a lot of things ready for remastered. Everything from Rage of Elements to this playtest document are all using the remastered terminologies and updated spells and things like that. And I think it's interesting to sort of get these little snippets. But there is definitely a lot of people who are not as understanding of that as we are, and are being very antsy about it, and very much oh, what does this mean? What does this mean without the full context of the classes? And that's how you end up with things like Cantrip Gate, where people are sort of losing their shit over cantrips. Yeah, being nerfed. But and again, I'll talk about this because sort of having played the Animist, I'm sort of not that I was ever concerned. You know my thoughts on that. I thought that whole thing was an absolute mountain out of a molehill. But but having actually played the Animist now and sort of looking at it through the lens of what we can expect with what we know of the changes, I can absolutely say with certainty I don't think we're going to have anything to worry about from cantrips being nerfed, because I think there is so much else going on with spellcasting that we're not going to have to worry about it.
I mean,
and that's what I mean though. Everyone's sort of looking at it through these very siloed lenses. I saw this a little bit too, where it happens all the time, but especially when Kineticist came out, a lot of people who didn't have Rage of Elements were looking at all these snippets of individual feats or just the pages of one element impulses and things like that. And they were making these snap judgments without any greater context as to how the rest of the class functioned.
Oh my god, the power level has gone up. All the other classes are falling behind. And it's
yes. And it's just just little things looking at individual feats, but I'm is this more powerful than a spell slot? Is this? And it's sort of no, it isn't. Just chill. Just wait till you see everything. And in the context of the class, I'm sure it'll make sense. If it was a company that I didn't have any faith in, then yeah, absolutely freak out and go, they got a track record of not doing this well. But I think Paizo's got a very good track record of being, especially with 2nd edition, of being very careful about this sort of stuff. I think it's safe to say that if it's something we're worried about, they've probably thought about it to some extent.
Yeah. And look, a lot of the times when it comes to playtest classes like this, they're trying to figure out how the community is going to respond to it, as much as they're trying to nail out the last bits of the design for the classes. Because a lot of the big things are already decided. Michael Sayer on Twitter has already said that a class is usually a year or two in the making, and that's before you hear the full that a playtest is even coming for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in many ways that's the thing. I think there's two things to mention here. The first is that this is absolutely a playtest document. People do have a tendency to sort of again, like the internet does, to sort of claim the sky is falling when they look at these documents and go, oh, this is, this class is going to be crap. And pretty much every class that people have really freaked out about, I remember when the Magus was being playtested and they had it had that really clunky spell strike, and everyone was just oh, this is bad. The Magus is going to be crap. And now it's one of the most popular classes in the game.
It is. I mean, personal preferences aside, I do like what the Magus does.
Yeah, exactly. But also, like, one of the things too that, like, particularly, like, I think it was Sayer as well who said, that one of the things to keep in mind is that they don't actually include everything they got planned for these classes, because they don't actually want to. Well, A, they don't want to overload people, but B, they want to actually. They have specific things they want to grok out and test.
Yes.
Because that's kind of the point. It's like how with the Kineticist playtest, they didn't include the wood and metal elements. They just wanted to do the base Western 4 because they were just like, we know what we want to do with the wood and metal ones, but the bigger idea is getting an idea of what people think of the class as a whole package first.
Yes.
So it's more important they focus on those basics, those core basics, and figure out how to make that work before they get too in the weeds with everything else.
Oh yeah. And we definitely see that in the 2 playtest classes that we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying how to playtest. We know how to playtest.
We know how to playtest. You play the game, you dingus.
You play with the classes. You talk about
You roll the dice. Although I will say, it is very annoying trying to find, like, because like I said last time, I'm mainly a virtual tabletop player. I end up having to use the Foundry the Foundry package and run Foundry at Pathfinder Society last night because Path Builder doesn't do playtests. That's just one of the things that Red Razors has always said. He refuses to do the playtest packages.
Yeah, because
I
so
tried.
Much work.
Yeah, it's so much work for something that's not permanent, which I completely understand. I tried. I actually had a look at Demiplane, which was interesting. Possibly worth a discussion unto itself, but
okay.
I will say, the fact that it didn't have everything like unlocked was very clunky. So in the end, I ended up just downloading the Foundry module, making a character in that, and running the character sheet off Foundry.
Yeah.
So I could have everything I needed, and that was fine. Like I've used Foundry before, and it's a fairly elegant system once you understand it. So that was no problem. But it's just interesting how hard it is to simultaneously how hard it is, but also how well supported the system is that you can find those tools. Just to do a playtest?
It was interesting because I watched, just before the playtest was released, I watched a live stream with one of the developers for Foundry. And he was talking about, all the things that they got going on for Pathfinder 2 and stuff like that. The recent introduction of the party sheet, for instance, on Foundry, which is absolutely fantastic. I've had one session with it and it's been great. But one of the other things that they were discussing was he got to the end of it and he was like, and yes, we will have the playtest module up as soon as the playtest is. And it just kind of indicates how closely Paizo is actually working with the Foundry people to get this working and going.
Yeah, it really is. I will say Paizo is playing very smart with the Foundry stuff because they're leaving it very in the hands of the community to deal with, but they are obviously working closely because they are doing things like they've got all the official modules now. Obviously they're doing things like working with the playtest, working to get the playtest running on it. So it's a very sort of it's sort of the thing I like about Paizo, and I will say like it is a bit of a blessing that Pathfinder's in like that sweet spot where it's like popular enough to have that support, but still small enough that Paizo can have that sort of community interaction.
Yeah.
So it's something I don't take for granted, but it does make me worry about like if Paizo does get like any bigger, which would be great for them, but the bigger something gets, the more unwieldy it becomes, and the less community focus a lot of these companies come by necessity more than design, actually. So that's my concern. But in the meantime, it's definitely a very good blessing, and I think Paizo's smart to put their eggs in the Foundry basket.
Oh yeah, and I think on the Paizo side of things, they're expanding in the right ways as well. My only critique, I guess, would be one thing that they're already fixing, and that's the website. A new website is on the way. I can't wait for
I feel the Paizo website being bad is just like one of those things we've just come to accept at this point. It's like when it gets better, like people will be like, oh like yeah, I was like, oh, like the reality has shifted.
Yeah,
things have, the natural order has restored itself.
And look, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to a better digital database as well. And all that is on the way. My only other critique is I would like more international support. That would be nice.
Of course, yeah.
Just having a presence out here in Australia, for instance, would be great. I know we had the PFS and everything else like that, but I just going back
It's a
into my own personal history. I was at the last Gen Con for Australia back in 2009, I think it was. Way back when. And that was a 4-day event, but Paizo had a table there. They had a table there. Jason Bowman was signing, it was like signing the core books for people who bought it because Pathfinder was just coming out. I would love to see that happen again. I really would.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously, in terms of like, obviously, like, one of the big things at the moment is like the world's only still getting used to being open again, and international travels basically only just started again proper and full in the last 12 months. So
yeah,
I think a lot of us are still. I've been saying I'm joking that a lot of us are still learning how to socialize again after so much time in ISO, but
pretty much, yeah.
But I think, I think it's interesting because Paizo really did have like a massive boom during like the pandemic, alongside a lot of the other tabletop stuff.
Yeah,
and like ever since like OGL Gate, that's what's like blown the lid off Pathfinder being a legitimate competitor in the tabletop scene.
yeah.
So I think we're gonna have to wait a little bit to see how that all plays out, but like it's definitely good times. But yeah, you're right. I think it's one of those things that I think like you can't overlook a market like Australia.
No,
Like everyone I
really
know
can't.
everyone I know who sort of talks internationally is like, yeah, like America's obviously like the big place, but then like it's not that Australia is ever going to be like as populous as that in terms of the demographic, but they look at it and go, wow, there's actually people here.
Yeah. Well, which is weird though, because Australia is the hub for the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it absolutely is.
And I think people forget that as well. But
Yeah.
I'm willing to wait because every time I complain about something regarding Paizo, 1 month later I hear an announcement or something saying that puts egg on my face. So I'm willing to.
I mean, Paizo, I think is like we're sort of sitting here like sort of having these like discussions like, oh, wouldn't it be great if Paizo did this? And it's like, I bet they've had these conversations like 100 times. Like these
absolutely.
are not things they are doing in a vacuum. They're not just sitting there being like, I wonder if Australia exists. It's like, no, like I'm sure that's something they've sort of discussed and have said, yeah, we gotta. How are we going to meaningfully engage with the Southern Hemisphere? So,
and
I have no doubt they're thinking about that.
And the new marketing team is all getting sorted and settled in and everything else like that. So I'm sure we'll see something announced within the next 6 months or something, 6 to 12 months, or
absolutely.
Especially once they've all settled in with the remaster. But
well, I was going to say this will segue nicely. One of the things I was sort of saying, and I won't sort of give I won't try to say too much because this is still something we're sort of working on in the background. The Animist is I've been working on a class pitch that I'm sort of keeping close to my chest at the moment. I won't say what it is.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say, you know this, Matt, but I'll just say to the stream, there is a lot in the Animist that is, I want to say, stepping on the toes of the design I'm planning for it. But like this sort of implies that I am sort of have all rights to those ideas, and Paizo isn't the first party publisher. So but that's kind of it. Like they are very much like, it kind of just goes to show, it's like if someone's thinking of something, then Paizo will like release something and go, hey, here's this thing, and it's like, oh, you're already thinking of that.
Yeah, no, they're thinking of things. But speaking of the Animist,
let's talk about the Animist.
Well, here's our girl Samo. I believe I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah, I really love this design.
I've got her on the left-hand side for the stream as well with the full picture, but just so people get the bigger shot of her there. That is our iconic for the Animist. She is a middle-aged Vaki woman from the lands of the Linom Kings. She is a Nephilim. But they always do really well with these iconic designs. They really do.
Yeah, it's it's just such a great look too, and like you sort of look at it and you just think to yourself, there is something very magical about this. Yes. But it also evokes a lot of the themes that you sort of get through the Animist. Like it does have a lot of ties to sort of, even though it's a divine class, it's almost like it's very primal-esque in how it sort of has like a lot of ties to the natural land. So like when I actually did my playtest character, I sort of did a very similar thing to this, where I made it. It was Asimar, because of course we're still using OGL at the moment, and I made it an Idlekin, and I basically I just completely knocked off the whole the horns poking up through the headpiece sort of thing.
Yeah,
because it's such an iconic look. It's such a great look, and it just works so well.
Oh look, I'd be lying if I said I hadn't considered making a hat around that whole design.
Yeah, and of course it's a classic Wayne Reynolds, layers upon layers on layers of everything. So yeah, which is interesting. There's an interesting story that they were telling on the stream about that when it comes to the Exmplar, and the fact he's a bit more bare-chested. But we'll cover that when we do his design.
Oh my god, is that a nipple? A nipple?
It's just oh no, skin! I don't know how to do this.
What?
Where does he keep his bags?
The Animist.
Yeah.
So, we have the base proficiencies for it. And before we get into it, what was your first impressions of the Animist? Because you say yours and then I'll say mine. When you scanned through it the first time, what was your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yeah, so I really like the general concept of this class. So my first thought was, of course, in Pathfinder First Edition, there was the medium class, which was obviously one of the big inspirations for this one. But it also has elements of the shaman, which was it was a witch oracle hybrid, but it sort of had that same sort of tie to assorted spirits rather than patrons. You had a spirit that would that you'd sort of attune to, and that would be what would determine your spellcasting lists.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, so I can't remember the specifics, but that's the general gist of it. So I thought this is a very smart design to sort of combine the two, because they sort of overlap a bit, but also it gives it a bit more focus. The medium was a very cool design in Pathfinder First Edition, but the problem with it was that it was incredibly janky. It was a very disparate class that was trying to do so much at once that you couldn't really make it do anything effectively, apart from a couple of niche build ideas that really let it specialize in certain things that no other class could do. Yeah. So I think making it just a general purpose spellcaster, I think that was probably the best idea they could do with this, short of just going for, going either full spellcaster or full martial, I should say. And I think the way they've done it here with spellcasting is very cool. And obviously we'll cover that as we go along, because I've got some thoughts both positive and some critiques about that sort of thing. But I think for the most of it, it's good. And I think I remember saying last time I was hoping we'd get just another traditional spellcaster after all the stuff with the kineticist and how everyone was sort of crying foul that there's no room for traditional spellcasting anymore in the system with that. And so no, I still like traditional spellcasters, and actually playing it, I had a lot of fun playing it. So looking through all this, I think my main takeaway from this is both through the initial read, and this is sort of stuck with me since I've sort of played it last night. I think the main read I have on it is that the spirits are going to be the big, how they handle that. No, sorry, the spirits, the apparitions. Yeah. Which is sort of the class, the main primary class feature. I think that's going to be the make or break on how well this class goes, because that is really where a lot of the fun comes from. That sort of how you handle those spirits and how you attune to them, knowing which one to use when, all that sort of stuff. That's sort of the gist of the class, and I think it's a very strong thematic and mechanical tie. It's just going to be ironing out the flaws and sort of smoothing out the rough edges that I think, as with any playtest, will need to be done. But I think out of the two classes here, this is by far the one that I think is the most well baked so far.
That is certainly one way to put it. As for my first impressions, when I kind of first went through it and had a look at the proficiencies and everything else for it, I must admit, and I've reversed my decision on this in context and in hindsight, but I thought it was just a cleric with extra steps.
Yeah, you were very hung up on the proficiencies for a bit. We were talking about it in our chat. Yeah, and look, I do like I remember saying to you, like, I was like, I honestly don't care either way. Like, I kind of like the fact it's 8 plus con hit points per level class with up to medium armor. I don't actually mind that because I love my gishes. Like, I love my gish classes where I can sort of play a little bit like it's spellcastery, but I can still get like a little bit of martial proficiencies. And there is one spirit in particular that is very heavily about martial combat. That gets some buffs from that. It's very sort of Battle Oracle-esque. So I'm all for that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's not a deal breaker for me. Like, I feel there's enough meat to the rest of the class that if they decided, yeah, this is going to be just a 6 hit point, no armor class, like, I don't think that would break the fantasy for me too much.
Yeah. Well, like I said, when I was going through it, I kind of saw the proficiencies for it. I saw that they had a little bit of casting and then a little bit on the side. I kind of considered the apparition casting to be like the divine fonts that we have for the cleric at the moment. So I didn't have a huge opinion of it. I thought this is interesting, I guess, but we'll see how it goes. But I will say that I have come around on it, especially after giving it a playthrough and kind of considering some of the things you can do with it. But yeah, I think we'll get into that a little bit more. But
yeah, and I will say I actually do have thoughts on that myself, and I sort of I hinted to you earlier today, like I sort of came to a crystallization about like what my main critique about this class is, and that actually has a lot to do with it. But I will let you go on with going through the document before we get to that, and I'll bring it up when it's relevant or when we're done talking about everything else.
Yeah, no, that's all good. Well, the first thing I wanted to go through was obviously the proficiencies. We have trained in perception, which, standard. Trained in fortitude, trained in reflex. Expert in will, which, once again, for a caster is pretty normal. Trained in nature and religion. And trained in a number of additional skills equal to 2+ your intelligence modifier. That's pretty stock standard, but I thought the 2+ your intelligence modifier was interesting. Because this feels like a class that should have more skills than it does.
Yeah, I think one of the things I noticed playing it last night is that, last night was quite interesting. I played a module. I won't spoil which one it was for people who haven't played it, but it was one that had a lot of arcane checks, and that was the only spellcasting proficiency I didn't take, and no one else in the group was playing an arcane caster.
Yeah.
So it was very frustrating, but that's an apropos. It's just funny. Yeah, but it is interesting because I feel that one of the things with the spirits is that the spirits give a lot of lore skills.
Yes.
Which I think is interesting, and it's got these. They are good to have for like those niche, and they're thematically suitable. So they're good niches to have. But I was going through them thinking, like, I really feel that like some of these could really do with some general skills as well. Maybe even like, I don't know if like they want to give you like feats when you have them or something, but that might be a bit much. But something like, with the I'm just looking at the names of them, like the. What's it called again? Imposter in Hidden Places, for example. Like, that's a very sort of stealthy, sort of occult vibed one. Like, that would have been perfect if you could like get stealth or something, or it gives you bonuses to stealth or something when you take that. The obviously things like the Steward of Stone and Fire that can give you, bonuses to nature. It's Ancient Battle that can give you things to your athletics and acrobatics, all that sort of stuff. So there's sort of like some room there to play around with that and make that a bit more interesting. But yeah, I will say, like, having actually done it, I think the base amount is fine unto itself, but I feel that was missing when I was going through the sort of the cycling of the spirits. It's like I got all these great bonuses from it, but then it's like, oh, I really need this one particular skill right now, and I don't have it. So the class feels like it feels like a skill monkey class. If that makes sense. Like, I'm not saying it should have the +8 that, the rogue has, but just like 4+ your intelligence modifier, I think would really round it out and kind of be able to give some real. Yeah, or at the very least, like they can do something like I was suggesting, which was like they find ways to slot more skills in there somehow, and I don't know how they would do that, but I reckon tying it to the apparitions it would be the obvious way to do that, and I think that would add some really great utility and flavor to those as well.
Oh, absolutely! Like, even if it was just you gain a circumstance bonus to one or two skills, or a status bonus, something like that.
Yeah, or it's like if you're untrained in this, you could become trained or something like that, like temporarily. So like just the little things.
Attacks trained in simple and unarmed attacks. Yeah, okay. Like that's fine. This is in line with what we're seeing with the remaster classes as well, in that they're not specifying specific weapons anymore. They're just saying you're trained in simple, you're trained in unarmed, and you might be trained in other stuff. So
which
that's
is
fine.
the way to go about it. Yeah.
Defenses. See, this was one of my sticking points. Because trained in light armor, trained in medium armor, and trained in unarmored defense. I feel like one of these is unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to highlight that.
Not like the other.
I don't think it needs medium armor. And I think giving it medium armor gives people the wrong impression of the class.
Yeah, it's like I said, I don't mind it because I like that Gishy sort of thing, but I do get, like, if they want to push it particularly more spellcastery, there are ways they can do that. They can allow you to make it still quite Gishy without needing it to have that. The only thing I will say is that it is nice to have like a strength option, medium, because when you look at light and medium armor is very firmly like, okay, this is not going to be a heavy armor class, but you can go strength and dex dump if you want. So, I think it's, I don't like I said, I like it there because that's my preference, but I think you're right in that it does need more meat on that side of it to justify it being there.
Well, it was the trained in medium armor that broadcast to me very quickly that this is a cleric. Because you think cleric, you think, okay, breastplate, some casting, a couple of other tricks up their sleeves, but that's... And like with the 2+ intelligence modifier for skills, that's also a cleric thing.
Yeah.
So just having the trained in medium armor on top, I was just like, yeah, I would rather have the medium armor taken away and a couple more skills.
Yeah.
Than have it there. Because my initial build for the Animist, it was very much, I was trying to figure out a way to make the medium armor work for it. And I was splitting my attributes everywhere. And I was considering picking up a tower shield.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like it's like I had no problem, but I was also building for the possibility that I would use the battle apparition. So but that's sort of it. Like if you're not going to use it, then medium armor is a bit superfluous. So
and we have in chat as well, you know, Reggie saying you look at the Animist and you don't think medium armor. It just doesn't feel like it should be there. Like I would prefer it to be more roguelike, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. Well, like I said, I think there's there are some things I think in regards to it overlapping with other classes, and again, that's going to come down to that critique I have of it. I'm just going to hang this like a little carrot so people can sort of stick to the end of this part. Like, just keep hitting it at that. But, yeah. Less stuff, that's good for something else and have it as a standard. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. As for the spells, this is a new thing that apparently we're going to be seeing with the remaster stuff.
Yeah.
That they're doing away with divine, arcane, primal, and occult spell.
Yeah, spell proficiencies are no longer separate based on tradition. They are just unified, and that's going to be I think that the importance of that is very understated.
Yes, it's
like I'm sort of mixed on it, to be honest, because like I get it. This is probably like an ease of use thing, and I do kind of get that. Like at the moment, spellcasting is a bit shoehorned by the fact that by the fact that when you pick a particular class, you know that class is going to be really good at that one tradition it's in. But if you try to multi-class in anything else, then you know it's going to be mediocre, and you're going to be forced to basically just pick, unless you're using the same attribute, you're going to be forced to pick non-DC attack spells because it's just not going to be a good modifier otherwise. This is going to make it a lot easier, and my only concern is that it's going to become very easy to cross-proliferate.
Yes.
Like, to the point where it does become a bit homogenous in terms of what people try to do. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a bad thing or a game breaker. I think for most people, because in the end, whenever you multi-class, you're still going to like unless you're using a same modifier casting stat, you're still going to have like slightly less modifier to certain other classes. So like a wizard is still going to be better picking up a witch multiclass than a sorcerer multiclass, for instance.
But won't have to worry about the attributes and everything else. But yeah.
Yeah, but it could be very easy for something like a wizard to like multiclass into like a cleric or even like a divine witch or something like that.
Yeah.
And like round out arcane with healing spells and things like that. And like I feel that cheapens some of the identity a little bit. So I don't know how much like I said, this could be like me just sort of doomsaying over nothing. But they are definitely trying to make spellcasting not necessarily easier, but more efficient. And I'm just a little worried that they might be like opening up too many gates to sort of say, okay, like this is going to be like a quality of life thing, but then it's going to turn into a balance issue, and that's my concern.
Well, one of the things that I'm noticing with the remaster is, one, this feels like a quality of life thing, but also on the second part, this does open up options for archetypes as well. Because one of the things we've seen up until very recently is spellcasting archetypes are few and far between.
They really are, and like things like, you know, like I was trying to, even just the other day, I was trying to grok out a build with Captivator, and that's really tricky to do if you don't have a class that is an occult charisma class, because so many of those abilities are just, so many of those spells in that are just save DC spells that if you're not, you don't have the best spellcasting proficiency possible with your already existing class, you're being forced to key to charisma with lower spellcasting proficiencies, which is not great.
No, it's not great at all. But with this, we're gonna see more like wizards picking up Captivator for one thing, or whatever other spellcasting archetypes they think of in the future. And once again, with the focus spell archetypes, because there are a few of those, including the Beastmaster, that will mix in well with this. I do agree with you. This might cause a problem some way down the line, but I think if it's going to cause a problem, it'll be with homebrew stuff more than anything else.
Yeah,
maybe
I think
some
Paizo
as well.
Yeah, I mean that's it too. Like I think Paizo's very self-restrained in that I don't think they're going to purposely go out of their way to create those sorts of overlapping problems. Like my concern is always like, yeah, like I think 2E as a system is very like it's tough to learn, but once you get the homebrew, it's like very self-insulated in terms of keeping things under control. So the more gates you open where it's like they're relying purely on good faith to just have people not do that, because a lot of the time it's not even bad faith. It's like people being like, well, I don't agree with Paizo's power balance, so I'm going to purposely push the power cap. It's like, no, like all the time people just look at these things and go, oh yeah, like this is harmless and the game allows it, so that must be the way it is.
But yeah, no, this is the train and spell. That's something that it's gonna be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Class DC, trained and Animist class DC. I mean, that's pretty standard.
Yeah. Well, I will say too, I think I discussed this exact thing last time too. I'm glad they're adding class DCs to spellcasters.
Yes.
It kind of annoys me that like they've had to split it, where it's like either spell DC or class DC, and it's like it never made sense to me. And that's fine for most classes because there'll be one or the other. But then you get classes where, like I think I told the story about my friend who's the Magus, who's very upset that like he doesn't get to use his weapon proficiencies that well because he doesn't get to key them to his core class ability. So yeah, it'll be good to sort of fix a few of those loopholes, but also just allow that to be allow that to make a bit more sense in terms of having those separate DCs for classes.
But that's pretty much it for the proficiencies. I'm not going to go into all the fluff for it. Like the playtest is readily available on Paizo. People can go for that if they like. But where are we? Ancestry and background, that's fine. We know how that goes. Aberration Attunement. So this is when we start getting into the actual thing with the Animist. Animists gain their power by serving as a bridge for spiritual entities known collectively as aberrations to commune and interact with the physical world in a process called attunement. Apparitions are myriad and diverse. They may be human spirits lingering on the border between becoming phantoms or ghosts. Animal spirits with particularly strong connections to the physical world, but lacking the mathos that would spur a transition into true undeath. And manifestations of natural locations grown forth and purpose over time. This, like, we're not going to get in time, of course, but this was screaming out a lot of the yokai stuff that you get for that we're going to be seeing a lot of in the Tianjia books.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, like, I think, because I think Michael Sayer was saying that his background is Native American, so I think that was it. So, like, obviously that's a big part. Obviously, those sorts of stories are a big part of Native American culture. So, but this is the thing, though, and this is the thing I think they've done really well with I mean, a lot of the recent classes too, but in particular these ones here in this playtest, which is that they're obviously drawing from a lot of different real-world mythological ideas rather than sort of making them completely Eurocentric.
Yes.
And that's the thing I think is cool. Like, as much as I have a lot to say about the Exmplar, one of the things I think is very cool about it is that it does draw a lot of inspiration from non-Western sources. So you have things like, the Iconic is very clearly based on Polynesian culture. It's got like very strongly like Maui from
I was about
from
to
those
say,
sorts.
you could say Maui, it's fine. We all
Yeah, no,
know.
I was about to say Maui. It's Moana from Moana,
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's but yeah, like, so it's very cool that they're drawing a lot of these inspirations, and I'm guessing that like Saya was probably drawing a lot from those sorts of from his cultural background when thinking a lot of these things too.
Yeah. Otherwise, each day during your daily preparations, you choose 2 aberrations. Now, this was one of the interesting ones, and I was trying to kind of wrap my head around why it would be 2, especially at first level. But then I saw I'm not sure where it is. You get 2 focus points, though. Which I found extremely interesting.
Yeah. And not only that, like, you get... I think 2 is probably a good number for that, because especially for, like, players coming into level 1, and if they're not as experienced with the game, like, I probably wouldn't recommend this class for new players anyway, but even for players who, like, are only moderately experienced or haven't played a spellcaster before, for instance.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be, like, a lot of advanced play in terms of deciding how to use your different spirits.
Yes.
So keeping it under 2, like, I thought, like, I had 3 because I was playing at level 5, but but yeah, like, it's I feel even that, like, it's it wasn't overwhelming to keep track of, but I'm also, as I keep saying, an obsessive with this game. So like, like, if that's the level it takes for me to go, yeah, I can keep track of this. Like, I can only imagine how difficult it is for someone who's sort of just picking up this class as the average consumer.
Yeah. And there is the whole thing to talk about. You can't really write every class as if it's for beginners. Like, you should write a class that's approachable. But at the same point, you do need to have that room for classes that are still balanced, but require a little bit more...
Yeah,
I don't want to say thought, but just kind of are a little bit more complicated and engage with the system on levels that someone who's relatively new to it wouldn't really be as aware of.
Yeah, and this is the paradox too that often gets mentioned a lot in these sorts of conversations. Like, a lot of people, and this is something in particular with Pathfinder 2nd Edition, because they're obviously trying so hard to avoid the mistakes of Pathfinder 1st Edition, which did have this sort of ridiculous, like, system mastery skill gap. But the thing I find interesting is, like, a lot of the conversations in surrounding the game often have this sort of thing where, like, they will say, well, this class is more complicated things should have a bigger payoff. And a lot of people who play 2nd Edition do find that, like, if they sort of play a class like spellcasting is obviously the big one, because that's always the one that comes up in conversations, but even a class like the Alchemist, for instance, or like one of the non-standard martials like Swashbucklers, like, a lot of people will say, I have to put more effort into learning this class, and then it's like no more powerful than any other class. And it's like, right, but here's the thing, it's not about power, it's about what the class is doing.
Yes.
You know, a well-played swashbuckler is going to play completely differently to a well-played fighter. A well-played animist is going to play completely differently to a well-played cleric and oracle.
Yeah.
That's the point. The point is not to punish people for mastery. It's to create different playstyles that aren't going to be completely egalitarian in terms of skill investment and not necessarily trade-off. But yeah, like you're going to have to work a lot harder to get complicated classes working. And I will say though, like I do think a lot of those sorts of classes do actually have a bigger trade-off in terms of like this class, for instance. Like the thing I was noticing about the Animist when I was playing it is that it is a class that does have a lot of versatility to it. And if you play it really well, you can cover a lot of bases.
Yes.
In fact, I was worrying playing it and looking sort of what it has available. It's like this could be potentially a little bit, I don't want to say it's overtuned, but it definitely feels like, compared to other divine casters, it could definitely it could definitely, like, if you're playing with like people of even skill, your cleric's going to be very firmly rooted in, you know, its core features like its domain spells and its divine fonts and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas this is literally going to be able to dance between multiple roles depending on what spirits you're using.
Yeah.
So I don't think that necessarily makes it better because the cleric still has its own niche. But the trade-off is you are going to be able to pull out more things as you get better and better at the class and get a better understanding of it, which is the way it should be. But a lot of people will conflate that to, well, that's slightly overpowered.
Dan says power creep confirmed, posting to Reddit.
Oh, sod off, Gianni. Go away, Gianni. Seriously though, shout out to Gianni from Hijinks.
Yes.
Our good friends over at Hijinks.
For tuning in and watching as we kind of go through this. But before we kind of go on, there is one thing I want to point out. Actually, I might leave it for when we start going through the apparitions properly. But I want to talk about the avatar form later.
Yeah.
Animist and apparition spellcasting. I'm not going to go through the full thing for it, because there's something interesting about the Animist that they haven't really done with a class before. Because with the Animist, to paraphrase and to kind of compress a very complex concept into very small bits, is split between prepared casting and spontaneous casting.
Yes.
So, as a divine caster, you select your divine spells as you would as if you were a cleric, for instance, where you pick from the divine list, and it's usually one or two. At first level, let's be honest, it's probably going to be heal. Unless you're really keen for another first level cleric spell. But when it comes to your spontaneous spells, you have a selection of spontaneous spells. But those spells come from a limited list that comes from your apparition. I kind of thought that was really interesting and something that really makes the Animist stand out a lot.
Yeah. So, now's probably a good time to bring up my critique, because this is probably what the best place in terms of like the class features that I think that sort of overlap with what I with that critique. So, I do think what they've done is very cool. I do really like what they do with the Animist spellcasting. The thing I think that to me is, I don't want to say. In fact, I'm not sure if limiting is the right word, but I think to me the thing that sort of is at least the least interesting thing about the class to me, from what I experienced yesterday, is the divine spellcasting. And that sounds like a very weird thing to say, but like, let me sort of finish my thought first.
Yeah, go for it.
Like, so basically, I really like the everything to do with the spirits. I really like everything to do with the fact you get all these different apparitions you can flip between, particularly with the channeler practice. We'll talk about the practices in a bit, obviously, because that's next up. Yeah, and there's some thoughts on that too. But like, playing channel was very fun because like that's like I get to like use an action to swap out what spirit I have. Each spirit has different spells, but they all share this sort of same resource pool of spontaneous slots. That's really cool. I really enjoyed that. The divine casting almost felt like it was an afterthought.
Yes.
this class is obviously it's a divine class because it is. That's the big thing with this class. It's coming out in the divine splat book. It has to be in many ways have that sort of divine focus. But the reality is, it almost feels more like it's a split between like primal and occult as well, because all the other spirits, like basically 4 of the 6 other spirits are like primal in their sort of style, like it's elemental magic, nature magic, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You have one, which is the I had it before. I literally had the name. I'm just looking at my own list. Imposter in hidden places. That's pure occult. It's telekinetic hand. Telekinetic hand, invisibility, veil of privacy, all that sort of stuff. Like all like the cool like a focus spell that's all about like, you know, inflicting paranoia and misfortune. Like it's pure. That's pure occult. So to me, the class almost feels like it's split 3 ways, and I find that fascinating. So the fact that it has this core anchor of being a divine caster, I feel is almost limiting the potential of what this class could be. Because I've said before, like my favorite spellcasting class in the game at the moment is Psychic.
Yeah.
Because and the thing that Psychic does really well is that it has these features that aren't the sort of the pure spellcasting spell list with its spontaneous spells. It has the emphasis on cantrips and amps and things like that.
Yeah.
The trade-off is that it has less general spell slots, like way fewer spell slots than most other full spellcasters do. But that kind of works because it lets them bake more of that power budget into it. And I will say that I think having the, in the Psychic's case, having the occult list kind of makes sense because like that's where you get all your cool telekinetic and mental powers and all that sort of thing. So having that in limited bursts makes a lot of sense for that. This really feels like the divine list, like, because I didn't use many of my divine spells last night. Like when I was playing it, like I had like my standards. I had some heals set. I had like a spirit link in case I need to defend some allies. A bless, all that sort of thing. But really, the main focus I was doing was I was playing with the apparitions.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing. Like I think the apparitions are where a lot of the meat of the class is going to be, and I think the divine list is kind of just an unnecessary anchor to the rest of the class's power budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's going to be like a bit of a problem because, like I said, this is the divine spell book, the divine magic book.
Yeah.
They obviously want to have a divine caster, but I almost feel it'd be better to cut that loose and let them have fun with the spirit aspects, because that does tie into those 3 traditions of magic, and letting them sort of run amok with that. And they can still have a divine apparition, like the Witness to Ancient Battles, the battle apparition. I think is a very, like, that's very heavily aligned, like divine aligned. Like that's got your like your shield, your runic weapon storm, phantasmal calamity, like all that sort of stuff. And it ties to what you're saying before. It's got that almost like it's got that almost war priest-esque feel to it.
Yeah.
That battle oracle feel. So they can do things. They could have like a spirit that's like the battle spirit, that's a divine aligned. They can have like a divine casting spirit and have that be like use the sanctification rules. So you can have like a undead spirit that makes you unholy, or a divine or a holy spirit that makes you holy, and all that sort of stuff. Like there's a lot that they can still do with that. But I think at the moment, my big peeve with the class is that the divine list doesn't, like, having it tied purely to the divine list doesn't really add anything to it, and just kind of anchors it to that particular tradition for no reason other than needing to have a divine caster in this book.
Well, okay, so here's the second question then. I know the apparitions, whichever apparition you have, changes the spells. We'll get into that in a little bit. But do you think it would benefit from having a similar treatment to the witch? As in, their primary tradition is chosen by the practice.
I would almost go so far as to say I think it would be cooler to just not have a primary practice. Especially because, like we literally mentioned before, that spellcasting is not tied to... Like, spellcasting modifiers are not tied to tradition anymore.
Yeah.
So now's the perfect time for them to have, like, a multi-tradition sort of class. And it doesn't have to be, like, full multi-tradition. Like, even just having, like, the spirits have their own unique spells, but like having them draw from the same resource pool. And whether they do that, I figured it would be easy to do it spontaneous, but they could do something prepared as well with that as well. They could still figure out a split.
Yeah.
But I think for me, like, that is the more interesting part of it to me than the divine casting part of it. I think it would be better if they cut that loose and put all of it into just figuring out how does this work with the spirits. And I don't know if that's something that I don't know if that's something that would be too much of a deal breaker for their vision for the class, because they would need that to sort of sell it as a divine caster. But I do think it would still work even without that, because in the end, spirits have a lot to do with the general theme of gods and immortals and the afterlife and all that sort of stuff. So I don't think that would necessarily be a deal breaker and ruin like one of the things in the book. But at the same time, I think it would help the design space a lot just to do that and lean fully into the spirits to give them something cool. You could still have that full spellcasting focus, still have up to legendary proficiency as you would usually would with a full spellcaster, but make it about how it interacts with the spirits and how they give you different spell lists.
Yeah. Oh no, I understand. And like you said, I think that might end up being a little bit too much of a deal breaker for their vision for the class.
Yeah, but this is my like perfect idea for the class, as it were. Like, not perfect idea, my perfect preference for the class. Yes. I realize it's a bit of an ambitious ask, and this might be a bit of them like if they were to get that feedback, they go, might just put that one in the pile over here.
Yeah, no, we might push this one off to the side a little bit. That's
yeah.
We'll keep that one over here. But that does actually segue kind of nicely into the practices.
Yes,
because we both have very similar opinion on both of the practices.
Mine. That was the like Trinidad Scorpion spicy take. This is going to be the milk take. This is going to be the like absolutely not spicy take at all. Yeah, Channeler is by far the best practice out of these two. It is in fact, I'll go so far as to say out of the two they've got, it is the only good one.
So just quickly, your practice is your base subclass that you get for your Animist, and it kind of dictates how your Animist interacts with the aberrations that it has. The Channeler gets an ability that basically says, okay, for one action, once per round, you can switch which aberration is your primary one. Yeah. And everyone's like, oh wow, that's really cool. We really love that. And then you get to the, what's it called? The Sage?
Sage.
And it's like, you're really good against undead, but nothing else.
Yeah, Sage is like... I realize with the playtest, like, a lot of the time they will just have something where they kind of like... They'll probably stop it and look back on this and go, yeah, we didn't really think about this one that well. I feel this one is fairly egregious, though. Like, it's...
Well, yeah. Because we should go for the breakdown for the practices as well. Because you get an action... But you also get your initial boon, which is the action and a first level feat. This is something we've seen numerous times before. I think Bard does it, Witch does it. There's a bunch of others that does it. But then it kind of goes to your intermediary boon at 9th level, which dictates your proficiency ranks increasing. 13th level, more proficiencies, and then 17th level. That's pretty much the breakdown for each practice. But with the Sage... Like, in particular, the action's very egregious for this, because you relinquish control of your physical body to an aberration, allowing it to fully unleash its spiritual power at the cost of your own agency. Until the start of your next turn, you're immune to control effects and spells that attempt to influence your actions, such as Charm or Command, unless its spell rank is more than twice your level.
Yeah.
However, the only actions you can take are to strike, cast an aberration spell, cast a vessel spell, or use an action that has the aberration shape. It's like... Charm or Command? Really? Like,
it's like I see what they're trying to do. I like the idea of some of the different practices being like you can have like either like the merry-go-round of spirits to like, oh, I can just swap them out on need be, or you like just fully commit to one and like get a massive bonus for that. But this is not a massive bonus. This is like a niche ability, and then you just gimp yourself in every other aspect. And like, not only do you gimp yourself, you just like it's this versus I get to change my spirits. Like it like the versatility you get from being a channeler is just
it's
completely unparalleled compared to what the Sage gets.
Like, if the apparition's possession was kind of like you gain a bonus versus effects with the mental trait, that would be a lot better. But it's specifically like you're just immune to control effects, and it's like, well, I mean, that's.
I feel as no, you're right. It's too niche. It's absolutely too niche. I feel the big thing for me with this as well is that I like the idea of what they're going for here. Like, I love this idea, like, because possession is a big part of like the sort of the fantasy here, like the animist fantasy, where you like have all these spirits, and it's like, I'm gonna let the spirit inhabit my body and just fully take control of me.
Yeah,
that's really cool, but it needs to be worthwhile mechanically to actually justify using it. Yes. At the moment, like, I almost imagine like it needs to be like, obviously Pathfinder's not a very spiky power game, and I think that's for the better. But you want whatever the trade-off for not having easy access to all the other spirits to be worthwhile, and you want to have that moment of like, I've let my apparition possess me, I'm going to beast mode now. Like, you want that moment, and this is not it. This is just a very mediocre, like, I get a small immunity and then I can't and then I like limit what actions I can do from here.
What, I can't take cover? I can't leave?
Yeah. And the worst bit is you lose the biggest boon from the channeler, which is that you just can't change your spirits in the middle of battle. You have to swap between battles. And that was the fun thing. Like, that's the thing I really enjoyed last night when I was playing it. I could just literally go, oh, cool, now I like need to AoE some stuff. I'm going to switch to the volcano spirit and chuck out a fireball. Now like, it's like, now I need to like, we had a gunslinger, sniper gunslinger. So like, I didn't end up doing it, but I was ready to like switch to the imposter spirit and cast invisibility on them so they can get their hide and massive 360 no scope bonus.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that was kind of my experience as well when I played it in the Pathfinder Society, because I was playing a God Leshy that was an Animist, and his core apparition was the Custodian for Guardians, the Custodian of the Garden. So the idea with being there, when he was out of combat, he could just kind of do his the healing aura thing, which is spectacular and very powerful.
Yeah.
But when he got into combat, I could just do the apparition's whirl and switch it out for the volcano one, and I would describe his gourd as filling up with lava, and it would start spilling out from all the holes, and he'd start fireballing everything. And it was fantastic, and it was fun. And just the contrast of that, and then kind of looking at the Sage and being like, okay, so I become immune to charm and command. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, this is the incredibly lukewarm take where it's like, yeah, we know this is a little bit underwhelming. Like, pretty much everywhere I've seen online that's been discussing has been saying, yeah, like, this is definitely like the weakest of the one of the weakest parts of the design here. They really need to do something with Sage, and I'm sure they will. Like, it's like, it would not surprise me at all if like maybe they even like already have ideas for what they want to do and just couldn't get around to it before the playtest, because like, this is so egregiously like subpar that like, I seriously doubt that they would just leave that sitting there and be like, oh yeah, this is actually fine.
I will say, however, in certain adventure paths, Sage would be good. Abomination Vaults immediately comes to mind, because you do deal with a lot of ghosts and spirits that do possession and that kind of thing. Command is very much a lot on the list for a lot of these ghosts and other things that you'll find. But yeah, it's just like, even the first level feat that you're granted for each of them is kind of
Yeah, the stance is good. Like, the channeler stance is very good, but
and the
apparition sense is like, do we really need another trap finding one?
Yeah, it's like, okay, we can see haunts, like, not just all traps.
Yeah,
we can see haunts, and it's cool because you can kind of talk to them, if I remember right. But yeah. Look. Moving on from there, the class stuff. Look, we've all been here.
Yeah.
The standouts is you get your third apparition at 4th, which increases your focus points in your focus pool by 1 to a maximum of 3. So the Animist, before any other class, gets 3 focus points.
Yeah, and I will say, like, that's the thing I was going to say before about the focus points, because I was playing obviously at level 5 where I had that.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I didn't use anything more than like a single focus point each combat. Not because like some combats you will be using more, but the 3 or 4 combats we had, that's just ended up what I ended up doing. And the reality is, like, this is one of the reasons why, like, I'm convinced, like, when Mark Seifter read the changes, because he was unaware of them, to the focus point recharging in Remaster, he was like, the new meta is going to be, like, focus as much focus points as possible, spamming them in combat, all that sort of thing. And doing it last night, I wasn't even playing by the remastered rules, just because, like, we were still playing, with the official stuff, so I figured, like, oh, okay, I'll play by one, recharge one focus point at a time and all that. But I only had to recharge one at a time anyway, because all the spells are things that either, like, I was able to pop off once, or it was stuff that, like, the dark animal form spell that you can sustain, and it's like you really don't need anything more than that, and you recharge all 3 by the end of combat. Like, if you've got a spellcaster that has like a general use focus spell that they can use in combat regularly, then they're set. Like, they don't need cantrips. Like, they're going to be well off for most of the combat.
I mean, the Volcano, we'll get to it, but the Volcano spell is very much like that.
It's very good.
Yeah, but most of the rest of this is what you'd expect. Simple weapon expertise, 4th apparition at 12th.
Yeah.
Master spellcasting, legendary spellcasting at 19th.
Yeah.
And this is when we actually get to the feats.
Yeah, that's got some juicy ones.
Like, just quickly, the apparition sense is the one we were talking about earlier from Sage. You can allow a spirit or undead, otherwise incapable of speech, to speak through you as long as you are in direct contact with it.
Yeah.
And like I said, in the right AP, this would be great. Abomination Vaults would be awesome because you deal with a lot of haunts and stuff. But if you pick the wrong adventure path, you're retraining that as quickly as possible. Whereas the contrast, Channeler's Stance, for 1 action. While in this stance, whenever you cast or sustain an apparition spell or vessel spell that deals energy damage, you gain a status bonus to that spell's damage equal to the spell's rank.
Yeah, so this is just a flat, like, dangerous sorcery-esque stance, basically.
Yeah, and whenever you cast a spell that has the vitality or void traits that restores hit points, targets gain a status bonus to the amount of healing received equal to the spell's rank. It's just a flat-out bonus. I mean,
it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Like, I think, this is one of the things I do get, like, when people complain about, like, they think, some feats can be a little too niche sometimes. It's like, Apparition Sense, yeah, fine. Like, it's got a niche feat. It's got a niche sort of thing that'll work in certain adventure paths. But then you get Channeler Stance, and it's like, why would you take anything else over that?
Yeah, it's just everything. It's just, like, it's so good.
It may even be a little overtuned in that sense, but at the same time, like, it's not a flat, like, it's not like egregiously more powerful than something like Dangerous Sorcery, because this is a stance. You have to get into the stance, and that is one thing I found playing it last night. I did have to, pay the action tax to get into stance, and sometimes I just didn't have the actions to do that.
No.
Sometimes it's like, no, I have to get into it right now, and I don't have time to get the extra 3 damage my fireball will deal. So, which is, that's sort of the way the trade-offs work in these sorts of games. And as we all know, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a game all about opportunity cost.
Yes, it's all about the actions, all about the action economy. But yeah, it's just like your focus spells and your cantrips level with you. So this, I don't want to say best in slot, because intermediary defenses and spiritual expansion spell are also pretty good, but
yeah,
when it comes down to choosing your practice between the 2 current ones, one is obviously the outstanding decision.
Yeah, I will say too, like, I will say though, looking at this, one thing to point out is that it is apparition spells specifically. So that is one thing. Like, you won't get it from your general divine spellcasting list. But so that does make it a little more manageable in that sense. Like, you won't be getting like sweet divine lances or anything off that. But
Intermediary defenses, you gain void
Yeah.
resistance equal to half your level, and you gain +1 status bonus to saving throws against the effects of haunts and the abilities of spirits and incorporeal undead. Like, even
Again.
intermediary defenses, like, it's not better than operation senses from a role-playing perspective, but from a flat mechanical perspective. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones too, like, a lot of adventures are going to have you fighting undead creatures, and you are going to be taking a lot more void damage than you would be taking, well, obviously vital damage, because, like, vital won't affect most creatures, but... Yeah. That's it. Good morning. Welcome to the chat.
Spiritual expansion spell. Now, this is an interesting one.
Yeah, you had some thoughts on this one. I'll let you rattle off about it, because you were very excited about this one.
Okay, so meta magic, right? Which is going to be called spell shapes in the remaster and everything else like that. On the surface, this is pretty much just your stock standard widen spell. You add 5 feet to the radius of a burst that normally has a radius of 10 feet, add 5 feet to the length of a corner line. You can use this feat to increase the radius of an emanation spell with a duration of 5 feet by dedicating your primary apparition to maintaining the spell shape. Dedicating the apparition to the spell prevents you from using the apparition's vessel spell, apparition skills, or avatar for the duration modified spell. So if you're having... I think it's more one of the ones that's coming up more than expansion spell. But what we're seeing here already with the spell shapes is it's not just a flat bonus that the meta magic is giving. We're getting a slight difference to what the core is at the cost of something else. For instance, with this one, this second part means, for instance, the spell that immediately comes to mind is Bless. Bless has a 1-minute duration. You can have your spirit kind of do the sustaining for it, and it extends it by 5 feet out. Which doesn't seem like much, but that's a 10 feet emanation from the get-go, and you can expand that by 5 feet every round. So it's still very much in line with what meta magic is supposed to be, but it's not just the default. Like, they're extending out what they're doing with spell shapes, or at least they're changing them to... They're flavoring them for every class, if we're to take this on face value anyway.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it's definitely a lot more interesting and unique than some of the base ones we get, things like Widen Spell and Reach Spell, that tend to be the default with a lot of the core classes, and even a few classes past that.
To the point where they were playtesting new classes and they just didn't include them in the playtest, because they were like, no, we know they're going to be in there. We know what they're going to do. If you want to put them on your list, you can do that at home, but we want you to test out these things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so one of the things I said, and I said this to you about this particular one, is that I think it's a little clunky, like the way it's sort of designed, because it really does have, it really does sort of require you to invest your full turn to have this payoff. And the thing I remember you saying you were interested in was the fact that it has the fall gap that has the safeguard. That when you use it, if it fails, then you don't waste a spell slot or anything like that.
Oh, that's the one coming up.
Oh no, sorry, that's the Sorry, I'm thinking of Grasping Spirit spell. Sorry, completely ignore me on that one. Sorry, I'm getting my spells confused.
No,
my spell shapes confused. Yeah.
Conceal Spell is pretty much the same as you'd expect from Conceal Spell, but they specifically say that, your apparition does it instead of you.
Yeah.
Gains the subtle trait. More importantly, this is a new one.
Subtle. That is a new trait.
So this is the one I didn't want to spend too much time on Conceal Spell in itself, because we know what it does. It's fine.
Yeah.
But the trait itself kind of... Do you think we're going to see more spells with subtle?
I think so, and because Conceal Spell, this is the exact same meta magic that I'm pretty sure is on every other... Well, not every other class, because I think only Wizard is the only other class that gets it. Which is weird.
Oh,
But
look, we can get into the
yeah.
wizard weirdness later.
Yeah, but it's more just the fact that it's the only one that gets it. I feel there's nothing wrong with the wizard getting it. I just feel like other classes should be able to get it as well. But that's apropos of this point here. Yeah, subtle trait. I think I didn't actually catch that one. That's a good catch. That's yeah, absolutely. I think that's obviously something that they're going to be doing in remastered. Yes, please give us some more hard coding traits for things like this, because it's it's like I said last time. I love the trait system so much in this game.
Well, Eldritch is telling us Charm, I think, was confirmed to have subtle, maybe message too.
Yeah, so... and that makes a lot of sense, because with subtle, like I assume what it means is like it means that people don't notice you casting it.
Yes.
So the thing about it is, yeah, like there is always a bit of a vague area in when you're sort of ruling how a player does a spell. Like the one of the big common ones a lot of players give is like, can I cast this quietly, or is there a way I can get away with casting this so that people don't notice? And it's like, technically no. Technically no, but then it doesn't make sense for certain spells to not let you do that, because it's like, you're not gonna like cast Charm at a person and go, Shazam, hey, you should do that thing I want you to do. Like,
yeah, because someone nearby is going to be like, did you just cast a spell at him?
Yeah,
no.
Exactly. And like, and especially because like those kinds of spells are all about being beguiling and trying to convince people to do things without them realizing it. It makes absolutely no sense to yeah, exactly what Sean said. I want to whisper across the room, but first I must shout and glow.
Yes.
So like, yeah, you basically like draw all attention to yourself and then like whisper really quietly. So either people think you're crazy, or like if they know what you're doing, they're like, that guy's just casting message. Like, what the fuck is he doing?
He's doing something magical. I'm going to use my arcane skill to figure out what it is.
Yeah. So you roll initiative now because you just triggered the entire room. So I think that's going to be really good if it is like those sorts of spells like Charm and Message do get that trait. That's going to really help. Both sort of with the ruling, which as a GM I very much appreciate, but also in terms of their actual practical use.
Well, that is one of the things we're going to see with the remaster, I think, is codifying a lot of the vague stuff.
Yes, please. Thank you, Paizo.
But, embodiment of the balance, look, this is...
I picked this one up for mine.
Yeah,
it's a good one to have.
Yeah. I'm not going to say best in slot, I'm really not. But if you do want to do the healing Animist, this is probably what you're going to do. Because you add heal and harm to your apparition spell repertoire regardless of the apparition.
Yeah, exactly.
So it means you can cast heal and harm spontaneously. You don't have to spend your divine spell slots on heal and harm. You just have them spontaneously.
Which is nice.
It is nice. I think that's more of a quality of life thing. This is the one I wanted to talk about. Grasping Spirit Spell.
Sorry, yeah, this is the one I was thinking of before. I got my meta magic spell shapes mixed up. Yes, this is the one that I knew you were very excited about.
I am very excited about this one. Because from the start, if the next action you use is to cast a spell that has a range and targets one creature, you can choose one target for the spell that is up to 30 feet out of the spell's normal range. On the surface, this is just like, okay, so this is reach meta magic. We're going to extend our reach out by 60 feet, but it isn't. Your apparitions briefly take on semi-physical forms and attempt to drag the target into range of the spell. The target must attempt a fortitude saving throw against your spell DC. On a failure, it is pulled up to 30 feet directly towards you and then affected by the spell as normal. You don't need to pull the target the full 30 feet, but you must pull it to within the spell's normal range. If the target succeeds at its save to resist the forced movement, the actions used to cast the spell, and this is the other one. The actions used to cast the spell are wasted, but your apparition is able to conserve and cycle the magical energies back to you, so you retain any focus points or spell slots used to cast the spell. I know that was a mouthful, but the precedence this sets in regards to spell shapes is absolutely massive.
Yeah, look,
it's clunky.
Yeah, it is, and that's what I was going to say. This one is clunky. Like,
yes.
I get the excitement, and I think having these sorts of fail-safes is very good. But at the same time, reading this, I'm sort of looking at it going like even with like the fail-safe, it feels like it's a very I don't want to say niche, but it definitely feels very like they could do this a lot more smooth. And in many ways, I'm almost convinced they could do this without it necessarily being a spell shape unto itself. Like, they could just do it as like grasping spirits, and then you pull them in, and then I don't know if that, like, whether or not you cast a spell or not is, I mean, that's the point. The point is that it's meant to be used in conjunction with spellcasting, and they'd need some sort of stipulation there to enforce that. But at the same time, yeah, like, I feel anything that requires you to roll more than one saving throw to have it work effectively is always a big risk, in my opinion.
Yeah, I will agree with that point. I'm always a fan of roll once. If you cast a spell, not
even roll, and not even roll once per se, but just like the entire dependency on it requires 2 rolls. It's like that's why the witch the crappy witch spell strike is so bad, because not only do you have to hit the creature to do it, but not only if you miss with the attack, then you waste the spell anyway. And if you're using like one of your focus slots, then that goes away with it. Obviously, this doesn't have that, and I agree that if this is the way they were going to do it, that's a good stipulation to have.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this is still a little bit clunky, and the fact that it is still reliant on 2 consecutive saving throws that the enemy's got to whiff to make it work successfly is always a bit of a risk. Yeah, it's a gamble. Yeah, but, and as much as I like this, as much as I'm not one of those people that like is salty about like the maths in the system and about how saving throws will succeed more often than they fail and all that sort of thing. Like, I do think it's bad that they have to fail this one to begin with, and then like they still have to like, there's still a good chance that they may pass the other one. So,
well, it's. One of the other things I'm finding interesting with it is the frequency for this is once per 2 minutes. Because at the moment, a lot of meta magic, anecdotally speaking, of course, but from my experience, from what I've heard talking to others, is that most people just don't use meta magic as it stands. Like, it's an extra action. The payoff isn't a lot for it. You spend your whole turn casting a spell, and then you might just end up losing the spell altogether.
Yeah, I will say, like, I think some certain meta magic are slept on. Like, I think Reach Spell has a lot of potential to be more useful than a lot of people think it is. Because, like, it's one of those things, like, I have to use an action to cast it. It's like, but you were going to use that action probably to get into position to cast it in anyway. Yeah. Like, and there are actual benefits and trade-offs to doing that. There are some meta magics that, like, definitely don't have as good of a payoff for the one action cost, or are a little too niche to use regularly.
Sustaining Dance. This was an interesting one, just mostly because it proves my point. And that's probably about it. You dance in tune with the rhythms of your spiritual allies, moving through a series of steps laden with power. You step or leap and then sustain. And I think that's a cool action compression. But it's just, I find the idea of an Animist wearing medium armor, like a breastplate or something, and kind of just stepping or leaping through the air. It very much felt like the old Looney Tunes cartoon where Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny are doing opera, and the breastplate.
Exactly what he's talking about.
And the breastplates obviously don't fit them properly, so they're just kind of leaping through the air, and the breastplates are bouncing separately. And it's just like, that's what this would feel like in medium armor, but it's still something I would pick because I find the aesthetics behind it like really great.
It's really cool. Like that image aside, which is hilarious. My only concern is that like this feels like Sustain is one of those actions that I feel that other classes could use some form of action compression too.
Yes.
Like, I feel like a lot of spellcasters, like a lot of people I know who play spellcasters, or not, actually I shouldn't say people I know because I don't know them, they're just randos online, but like a lot of the discussions I see online with people talking about spellcasting, like sustaining is one of those things that is often like a bit of a feels bad thing.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I think it's fair for the most of it. Like, it makes sense in a lot of the instances that a lot of sustained effects are good enough to justify having them be sustained. But I think what would make it a lot better is if other classes did have things like this, where they had the option to pick up feats that allowed them to do other things in conjunction with sustaining, and it doesn't have to be this specifically. If anything, someone on Reddit actually made a very good point. Leap is basically a 10-foot movement, and with powerful leap, that becomes 15 feet.
Yeah,
like that's a very potent movement. Like for something that is supposed to be like a very limiting action that sort of says you really have to focus on this, I feel that has potential to be like a little not dramatically overtuned, but it is very strong. So like I would almost go so far as to say they'd probably be better keeping it with step rather than leap.
Well, I think it's a part of it's one of those player psychology things that Paizo is doing, in which they want to encourage the players to move around more.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The step makes you immune from reactions. Leap isn't, but that means you can leap onto pillars. Or
and Sean just pointed out movement ignores difficult terrain at that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, that's one thing I didn't actually realize last night. I was like, because I actually had a situation last night, because this is the second feat I took on my Animist, and I was in a room where it would have been advantageous for me to leap, to sort of leap because we were in difficult terrain. I forgot that leaping lets you actually ignore difficult terrain. I was just like, oh, I can't step because I'm in difficult terrain. And like, I'm kicking myself now thinking about that.
Yeah.
So, but like, I guess my thing with this is like, I'm fine with it, but I'm really hoping that this is sort of like foreshadowing a precedent that they're doing other things with other classes to give sustaining more action compression options.
Yeah.
Because I think that would go a long way to helping the concerns that people have with it. Because at the moment, sustain is very much like a sort of very, not vestigial, but sort of like, it's a very like loose hanging sort of action that a lot of people just feel limits them more than it does actually add anything meaningful to the game.
Well, back to your point about, you'd like to see more classes have this.
Yeah.
This also reflects to one of the projects we're working on in the background. But a druid feat that allows you to command an animal and sustain. Like that kind of action compression would be amazing.
And it's amazing too, because like that's the perfect instance. It's kind of like we were saying about the counter spell stuff last week. You don't want something that just completely negates the need to have sustain. Like if you was like do the thing that's like this just gives you like lets you stride and sustain. It's like, okay, that's just dumb. Like that's stupid powerful. Everyone would take that if it could. But if you had something that ties thematically into your class, like for example, if you could like say be a wizard and like I don't know, like you're a wizard with the meta magic school and you can meta magic and sustain, for instance.
Yeah,
like
that'd be awesome.
That'd be cool. Yeah, things like that. Like that, because that's the thing I like about Pathfinder, and we've had these discussions when I've been showing you some of my designs about how cool it is when you come across that action compression that's like, oh yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense and it's really cool and flavorful.
But moving on, Aberrations Enchantment.
One more thing too, Ninja just said Leap is one of the least used actions. No one ever talks about it. It is so underrated.
It is.
Like Leap is stupidly good and no one ever uses it. Like it's one of those things I'm going to try and encourage my players to do more. And after last night, try and remind myself to do more because it is stupid good when used in the right circumstances.
One of the things you have to remember about Leap, though, and this is the thing that people forget, it doesn't actually require any rolling. You don't have to do an athletic skill check or anything like that. You just leap 10 feet, I think it is.
That's why it's stupid good.
Yeah. So if you're trying to... GMs, free advice. If you're making up your own battlefields and you want to make it a little bit more interesting, keeping Leap in mind and making sure your players know about it will give you so many options.
Add a 5-foot crevasse.
Yes.
It's just there. There's if only I could easily leap across this. Wait a second.
But... Apparition's Enchantment. Apparition... Yeah, your weapon deals an extra d6 spirit damage. This is very much like the wizard...
This is the bread and butter. Yeah, this is the bread and butter. I cast a spell and then I can deal extra damage with a weapon. That's fairly standard for all spellcasters.
Channel Protection. Your unchanneled stance in your last action was cast a spell from your spell slots. You and all adjacent allies gain a +1 status bonus to AC and to reflex saving throws. Like, they're just rubbing it in now, aren't they? Like, Channeler stance is just that good. I know it costs an extra action, but, you do this on your second round and stuff like that, and it just makes it so much better. Divert Control. Your turn begins while you're under the effects of Charm or a similar spell, or an effect that would give you the controlled condition. This doesn't require you have the earlier things, like Practice or Apparition Sense. Like, this is just something you can pick up.
Yeah, and that kind of just diminishes the Sage's value even more, because this is just like another, like, ignore the effects of a charm spell or control condition. It's like, so I can just pick this up as a feat at level 4 and keep my spirit merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Like,
if you have the Apparition's Possession ability, it gets a little bit better, but it's just kind of like, for a niche effect, yeah, look, one of these things feels a lot better than the others.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, like, really, the Sage is in such dire need of a buff.
Walk the Wilds. You add animal form to your Apparition spell repertoire, which is just fun. You can turn to animals.
And Darkened Forest form. I will just say too, like, because I played, I used Darkened Forest form twice last night. That's a very cool spell. Like, it's just a very, like, fun, like, I can't, like, I'm trying to remember which, like, show it is, or game or something. It's like the one where, like, you have, like, the shadow animals, but they, like, look like the constantly shifting ones, but they kind of, like, look like they're shuddering, like they're, like, static distortion and things like that. I can't remember which like media that's from. But like it's that but like that's what it felt like. It felt like that very sort of like, I'm turning into a shadowy creature, and then you can just like shift into another one if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was very cool. It was a very very flavorfully thematic, and like it still has like an interesting niche compared to animal form.
Operation Stabilization. This is if you get someone does attack of opportunity while you're casting a spell or sustaining one. You get a DC flat check to ignore it, or to at least to keep it, which I thought was good. I mean, but that's just, once again, that's just a quality of life one.
Yeah.
Blazing Spirit gives you enhanced resilience and retaliatory defenses.
Yeah.
Once again, this is kind of a non-defensive defensive buff.
Yeah.
Like, it burns people it gets too close to you, so it's like a fire aura.
Yeah.
Grudge Strike.
This is a good Gish one.
You channel the spiritual power of ancient rivalries or spiteful grudges into a devastating attack. Make a melee strike against a creature within your reach. You gain a +2 circumstance bonuses to attack and deal an additional 2d6 void damage to the target. This is just a better Smite Evil.
Yeah, it's a better Smite Evil, but it's hold on. I'm gonna while you're looking at the next one, I'm actually gonna Google PF2 Smite Evil. I'm just Googling it because I want to make sure that it's not just a
I don't play champions a lot, so check.
Smite Evil is one action, so that makes it so that keeps it in check at least.
Okay. But one of the operations you are attuned to grants Heraldry War Underworld lore. But still, that's like, does Smite Evil use up a lay on hands? Or am I thinking of 5e?
No.
Okay.
You're thinking of probably thinking of 1e even possibly.
Oh yeah, because 1e uses the channels.
Yeah, but it's so the Smite Evil is 4 extra good damage, increasing the 60 of master proficiency, which presumably will become spirit damage. So look, it's I mean, and so technically like Grudge Strike does deal more, but like I said, you're playing a full spellcaster, and as much as I love the Gishi builds, this is not going to step on the toes of any marshals. It's,
God, no.
Especially like it's like if I'm using my Witness to Ancient Battles to do that, I'm already using an action to cast and or sustain it that turn anyway. So like, it's not going to be stepping on too many toes. It just gives you a nice damage burst.
Medium's Awareness. This is interesting just from the pure fact that you gain a bonus to Perception.
Yeah. I will say too, last night playing a high wisdom class with a decent perception modifier after ages of playing classes with low wisdom was very refreshing for my initiative rolls.
Roaring Heart. One of the apparitions you are attuned to grants mountain lore as an apparition skill. You surge forwards, inexorable as water, snow, or stone crashing down a mountain. You stride up to twice your speed. At any point during this movement, you can shove up to 2 creatures you pass adjacent to. If you succeed at the shoving the enemy, you and each ally within 30 feet of your destination square gain a number of temporary hit points equal to half your level. This is very much a movement. Like, this is what I was saying about the whole medium armor thing.
Yeah.
There's this like undercurrent for the entire Animist that feels very much, we want to keep moving, we want to keep on the run, we want to be constantly either stepping or leaping or striding. Like it kind of just.
Which makes sense. I'd almost say, like, because it's funny, because like, it's kind of, I know your thing is like talking about like the proficiencies and all that, but my thing goes back to what I was saying before about it not feeling like a proper full divine caster. Things like this really seem to me like it's more like it leans more heavily towards primal for this sort of stuff. Like you imagine this being like a wild strider or something like that, not a divine caster, not a sort of holy or sort of sagely cleric type character.
Possession Echo. You regain an apparition spell slot.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's nice. Confused until the end of your next turn was kind of Full was rough. Interesting, but you know, soul synchronization. This one was interesting as well, because this actually builds off of Apparition's possession. And this is probably where the Sage practice starts to actually pay off.
Yeah.
Once per round, you can attempt a recall knowledge check as a free action, sharing the results with your Apparition. That kind of suggests that your GM is actually voicing your Apparition at all. All strikes you make with a weapon or unarmed attack deal an additional 2 points of spirit damage. Or you gain resistance equal to half your level against all physical attacks, but you have weakness to spirit damage equal to 1/3. Please don't make me do math. Just make it 1/2 or something. Don't do the 1/2, 1/3. I know it's balanced, but it makes my head go pop.
Yeah, don't do 1/3 your level. No one likes dividing in thirds. But also, like, again, this is interesting to me, because reading this, like, this is, again, going back to the fact that I'm loving the gishiness of it all.
Yeah.
But it does sort of, like, read to me almost like Sage is almost, like, custom built for something like the, or purpose built, for something like the Witness to Ancient Battles. Like, you almost feel like you want it to possess you and have, like, it really become, like, you know, all right, now I'm being possessed by an Ancient Warrior, now I get all, like, my cool physical abilities. Like, it's all, which is cool, but it's kind of weird because, like, it's weird for two reasons. The first is, like, why isn't this just a base part of the Sage class rather than a level 8 feat? But also, like, is the Sage meant to be the Gishi sort of build? Like, because in that case, they need more than one spirit that's going to do that. They need to either add more spirits that will encourage you to go Gish, or they need to have the Sage be more versatile so you can have those more proper spellcasting spirits, apparitions, possess you and get benefits from that, rather than pushing you towards that physical melee playstyle.
Moving on, Spirit Walk. I am going to be speeding through a couple of these because I do want to get to Exmplar.
We are, I was going to say we're sort of pushing for time.
Look, Spirit Walk is more for, once again, to interact with haunts a lot. Windseeker, this adds the aerial stuff if you're doing animal form.
Makes sense.
Apparitions Quickening, this is the Animist version of Quickening. I think it's pretty much the chosen apparitions dispersed. Oh, okay. So, quicken casting for the wizard is once per day, right?
Yeah.
This is not once per day.
This is once per spirit. Oh, once per apparition, yeah.
Yes. So,
which is cool.
Yeah.
But I like the whole dispersal thing. I feel the dispersal thing is a bit, how do I say it? It reminds me of like the playtest Oracle when it was like, oh yeah, like you get knocked out for like 8 hours a day. Like it's that sort of like when you like cast at your maximum curse. It's sort of like, okay, like love what you're going for, guys, but I think this is actually a little too punishing.
Well, once again, if we bring this back to the Sage, who's going to be focusing on the one apparition, then, they can disperse the other ones. What does it matter to them?
Yeah, this is true, but at the same time, if you disperse them, then you're not going to be changing in battle. Like, the channeler can just call down another spirit instantly, whereas the Sage will have to finish the battle. Wait, what is it? It's like an hour or something? No, it's 10 minutes. 10 minutes to change? Yeah, 10 minutes to change the your spirit. So regular downtime refocus. But, like, again, like, it's just another point against Sage for me. I get what you're saying, but I think in practice it's not. It's actually the opposite. I think it's fairly limiting.
Fly on shadowed wings. You can fly. He can fly. You get a flight speed equal to your land speed for 10 minutes, but your chosen apparition is dispersed for the duration, automatically reattuning to you 10 minutes later. So once again, this is using your apparitions as a kind of a resource management thing.
Yeah. I will say, like, with the dispersal mechanics, I do like this a lot more than I like the permanently, like, disperse stuff for the rest of the day. Like, yeah, I feel like just saying you can't access your spirit while it's off doing this other thing, it's like, that's cool. I really like that. I don't like you lose the spirit for the rest of the day. Like, to me, like, yeah, like Ninja just said, like, it's effectively kind of part of his repertoire. I think it's punishing, not crippling. I agree, but I also think it's, like, if it were me, I wouldn't be doing that unless I was, like, unless the trade-off was really, really good. Yeah, and that's the problem.
Overwhelming Energy. This is the Animist version of a spell shape we're already aware of.
Yeah.
It ignores an amount of resistance.
Yeah, everyone has Overwhelming Energy.
Yeah.
It's so blasé. Every caster has it.
Shadows Within Shadows. I thought this one was interesting. Because you would be detected by enemies seeking you with perception, or an enemy will succeed with a counteract check to end a spell you have used to make yourself hidden, concealed, or undetected. Your attuned apparition is extremely hard to reveal, and it extends that elusiveness to you. The enemy must re-roll the triggering check and take the lower result.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's a misfortune effect as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of rare, but it makes sense.
Yeah, like, it's probably a bit too niche, but I don't hate it.
Spiritual Guidance. Oh, okay, so level 12 is definitely our reaction level.
Yeah.
Spiritual Guidance, the tree. You or an ally would fail, but not critically fail with a strike or spell attack against the enemy you can perceive. Your attuned apparition guides your attacks home, even when you and your ally find your hands to be too unsteady. The originator of the trigger and strike, it's fortune effect. You roll
and
twice,
like,
take the higher.
Yeah, this is very good. Like, anything that's like inflict misfortune upon an attack roll is yeah. Oh, sorry.
Fortune, misfortune.
Fortune and misfortune on attack rolls is going to be very strong because that's going to be very generally useful.
I find it interesting that they've ditched the wording where usually you would find at the end of the spell, this is a fortune effect. They're just leaving it in the traits now, and it's like, that's...
Yeah, well, why wouldn't you? Oh, and here's another misfortune effect. The next one, Whispers of Warning.
Yeah, that's the one where, the originator of the trigger attack must attempt a second attack roll and take the lower result.
Yeah.
So you have very much the backwards and forwards of, are we giving ourselves a blessing or someone else a curse? It's very buff debuff.
Yeah.
Banish
I almost feel those two.
Flesh.
Yeah, I almost feel like those two should be merged together and just share the same cooldown.
Ooh, see, that would be interesting. Banish Falsehoods of Flesh. This is one that a lot of people have been talking about. Because basically, you tear off a polymorph effect.
Can't affect a creature you're aware of.
So if a dragon or a devil or something is using Disguise Self, or one of the higher levels like Change Form, you can just stop it from happening. Or if an enemy wizard has used Form of the Dragon, you could also just stop that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It makes sense though, I guess. Cause,
it does.
Yeah, it's very flavorful for what the Animist is.
Do I think that Spiritual Guidance can be used on an ally you can't see? I think you'll find it needs... Well, let's go back to it quickly. You or an ally would fail. Okay, so not even, like...
against an enemy you can perceive. Well, think of it this way: the spirits can see your ally.
No, that is very true.
That's my read on it anyway.
Cardinal Guardians. Whenever you succeed in a spell attack with Operation Spell Visible, blah, 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 you get a +2 stabs bonus to your spell attack modifier. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of this going forward. Like, for instance, with the wizard, I could see this happening with you cast a spell from your curriculum.
Yeah.
And it fails or you hit.
Yeah.
And you get a bonus to your spell attack and penalty.
Yeah, I will say, like, I feel this is a good, because one of the biggest complaints you see a lot in the spellcasting debate is that it feels like there aren't many ways to influence a lot of spell modifiers, and I do agree. That is one thing I do agree with. I don't think it's so egregious that it ruins spellcasting as drastically as people say it does, but I do agree that it can be hard sometimes to have that. So having these sorts of effects that give you your status bonuses to spell attacks and things like that, like I'm not against that sort of stuff. More things that add more ways to interact with the game in ways that aren't just like straight, big dick damage rolls. Is good in my opinion.
Forest Heart. Yeah, this one it's an attack.
Yeah. And again, love me some gishiness.
I do as well. This one affects everyone within pretty much 30 feet, if I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make a 4d8 bludgeoning damage roll. I find that pretty cool. Spiritual Spell Shape Stance. You can use a spell shape feat that normally requires one action as a free action.
Yeah.
But this is a stance as well, so keep in mind you can't use this and Channeler Stance at the same time. This is something I ran into when I was designing the Arsenal Mage for Sinclair's Almanac, where it has a bunch of stances, but because they are stances, you can't stack them on top of each other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, because I feel like, again, having the spell, with spell shapes, again, having some action economy compression to use them a bit more easily. I feel that's something that could be used with the existing spellcasting classes. So hopefully, again, this is a precedent for what we're going to be seeing in Remaster, and not just.
Fuck, I hope so.
Not just some power creep. I don't think it's even power creep, but it is definitely tools that the Animist will get that other classes will be wanting.
Yes. You know all natural difficult terrain, and you gain resistance equal to half your level against damage dealt. Yeah, this is another stance to kind of tie in with that Geordie feeling. Echoing Channel. If the next action... Oh, this one was interesting. If the next action you use is to cast a 2-action harm or heal to heal or damage a single creature, choose yourself or one other additional creature adjacent to either you or the target. They gain a 1-action version of the spell.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of trippy.
I like it. I'm not sure if it's a level 18 feat, to be honest. Because we have stuff like communal healing for cleric at lower levels. I feel this would be fun at a lower level. This doesn't read level 18 to me.
No. I would be happy if it was dropped to level 12 or 14, or even lower.
I'd be happy if I saw it in single-digit levels, to be honest. It doesn't feel like one that would be too egregious to have there, and this
you
feels
still
very...
use the spell slot.
Yeah, exactly. So things like that, and this is the kind of spell shape we want to see more of. Stuff that's encouraging you to do more than just the basic reach and widen spells and all that sort of stuff.
Soul Cycle, your spiritual allies guide your movements, allowing you to prepare for the trials before you faster than thought. You step or leap, then enter an Animist stance that you know. So this is action compression again. That works with sustaining dance and everything else like that.
Yeah, and level 18 and 20 is when you start to see a lot of those super action compression feats. The ones that will, in fact, just negate a lot of existing need for certain action taxes, but that's kind of intended. By that level, it's kind of okay, now we're going to let the reins off this stuff.
Spirit Sacrifice. This is something I think we're going to see a lot in War of the Immortals, where it's if you would die, do a thing and you no longer die.
Yeah. By the way, just answering a thing that Ninzach said in chat, is Frost Heart, a range attack you can use while morphed in Darkened Burrows. Yeah, I don't think so, because can you use stances in polymorph forms?
Nope.
I don't think so. So yeah, that alone. Yeah, and a lot of the time you can only make the animal attacks, so you wouldn't be able to make the bludgeoning damage stuff. So that's
particularly
right.
with dragon form, it points out specifically in dragon form that you can use your breath weapon while you're in your dragon form.
Yeah.
Usually you can't cast spells or anything like that when you're in
Exactly. That's right. It does have that stipulation. Sean just said Animist sleeping a lot for some reason. Makes you think of Breath of the Wild, where it's sort of bouncing through the air.
Yeah.
I'm just having flashbacks now. Especially the lightning ones. Oh god, fuck those things.
Okay, so one of these 20th levels we can ignore because that's just 10th rank slot. Eternal Guide. Choose a single settlement with a population of at least 100 people. Whenever you die and are not returned to life within 24 hours, as long as this settlement still exists and there are no other claims on your soul, such as a contract, and nothing trapping your soul, your attuned apparition magically transports your soul, remains, and all of the items you had worn or carried at the time, you come back to life.
Yeah, that's a good. Hey, it's Leo. It's Weirdo, one of the players and one of my
nice.
one of my regular players in my home game. Good to see you here.
Welcome.
I'd be curious to see what shenanigans you pull off various feats and interact with heals, since dual heal one specifies it's a separate heal. Yep. Yeah, it's like I said, it's it's a good point, and I think like being able to sort of stack with that sort of stuff would be interesting to see. But I think either way, it's the sort of stuff I'd like to see more with spell shaping.
Oh, well, that is an interaction before we kind of move on.
Yeah.
So the grasping spirit spell.
Yeah.
Use that on a ally with the 2-action heal, and you bring him 30 feet towards you out of combat. So if you have your fighter who has this tendency to always run to combat and then have no support, you have him with means to bring him back and kind of heal him a bit.
Yeah, exactly. And Sean's just clarifying some stuff in chat about stances while polymorphed, so that's good to know.
Yeah. You can't speak, cast spells, or use manipulate actions that need hands.
Yeah. Yeah, it's FF14's rescue. Yeah, actually, fun fact, I have a player in one of my games who's tossing up, in the same game as Leo, in fact, who's tossing up a spellcasting dedication. He's playing a medic investigator. Yeah. I showed him Friend Fetch because I was like, you can literally just use that to grasp people close to you and then patch them up.
I am so annoyed that Friend Fetch is uncommon.
I want it to be made into a common spell in Remaster. I have hope though, because a few Adventure Path only spells have been made common. I noticed that we didn't end up covering the Rage of Elements spells, but one of the ones which is one of my favorite spells from an Adventure Path, which is I can't remember what it's called, but it's the water one that lets you summon a pillar of water and you can just swim through it. That's been made a common spell in Rage of Elements, and I'm so happy for that.
Yeah. Friend Fetch is just a great spell that I grab on any of my wizards that I can, and I'm annoyed as hell that I can't put it on my PFS wizard.
Absolutely.
Well, now we get into our apparitions, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get into as much depth as I would have wanted. But we can do a little bit of the overview of what we want to talk about. So just as an example, the Custodian of Groves and Gardens, it gives you a skill. Now, this is the same across the board. Every apparition will give you 2 lore skills. Like we were saying at the top of the stream, I feel it would be fine if it also gave you like another skill, or at least a bonus to another skill, even if you have to put that behind like a feat tax or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think there's a lot of potential here to give a lot of customization in terms of what that would allow for skills, and I think that would help pad out that skill gain that you mentioned before that you think's a bit lacking. Because I agree, I think it would be great to be able to swap between these spirits and be able to just get. It's like, I've got Stalker and Darkened Burrows. I gotta hunt something, so it gives you survival, for instance, or I gotta track some parts. I find some parts, in fact. You could do imposter in hidden places, stealth, stealth and thievery.
Deception.
That's an absolute given.
Your apparition also gives you the spells, like your spontaneous spell casting.
Yeah, like I said, I think this to me is the interesting part of the class, and this is the part where like I said, like you said before, I agree they're probably not going to change it, but in my dream idea of this class, they would ditch the divine spellcasting as the baseline and focus everything into the apparition spells, because I think to me this is where the meat of the class is. This is the cool part of the class, and I really want to see them do this part justice. This was the fun part of it when I was playing it last night. Just swapping out, being like, I need this one particular spell out of my 3 spirits I've got prepared for the day.
And it was very cool. I noticed it when I was doing it as well. That I found it was very cool. We'll get into the vessel spell in a second, but I did want to talk about the avatar for just a quick second. Have you ever seen anyone cast avatar?
No. like that. Okay, this is one other thing about the class. It's like, it's cool that I don't hate it. Is anyone ever going to use this?
Like,
I don't know.
What level is avatar? Like, is it 9th level, 10th level?
I want to say 10th. Hold on. So, avatar, it is, looking at good old Archives of Nethys, it's a 10th level spell. So this is going to affect level 19 characters. Yeah.
Like, this is great, but I feel like Paizo dedicates so much time and energy to the avatar spell that you see so rarely. Like, I ran a campaign to level 20. None of my players cast it.
Yeah. I like it a lot, but I also... I like the idea, but like, yeah, it's... This is the downside of Paizo doing the logical thing and making spell power scale at an actual logical level. It means that you don't get these super powerful spells where it's like, I literally become the avatar of God, you know, before the end game.
Yeah.
Like, because really, that's when you should be getting spells like that, but how, as you said, how many people are getting to that point?
It's... So my dream with this the whole avatar thing is I would like something that's like a 5th rank spell that's like Petitioner or Herald.
Yeah. The problem I can see with that is that I feel with Avatar, like, it almost feels like they need to do that, but they've sort of already set a precedent by having Avatar only be 10th level, so they're not going to go back and reprint like a 10th level version for all the existing gods.
Well, I will say too, like, a lower powered one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I want to see it. I want to see it. Are they going to do it? Probably not, because for that exact reason. Sean's pointing out, I think it's partially because Battle Form feels bad, especially for spellcasters.
Yeah.
I will say, I do think Battle Forms are slept on a bit, because I think a lot of people write them off being like, oh, they're not as good as Marshals. And I think the problem with Battle Forms isn't that they're bad. It's that the problem is that you don't really get to do anything interesting with them when you do it. The damage they do is more than enough. The modifiers are more than enough to make them useful. You get some cool things you can do, like, you know, you look at the Custodian of Groves, for instance, and it gets like a bludgeoning with grab. It gets a range thing that's like a that you call an opposed piece. That's great, by the way. Where it's a 66 mental. It's like, you will no longer fight. Damages mentally.
Yeah.
Wait a second. But like, the problem is that it's like you had a marshal that just had all the feats stripped out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, they force you to beat Sitmos, which isn't much of the cast of fantasy. I will say, like, the thing with it is that if you do it, you are doing it specifically so you can have that moment of, okay, well, I don't need to go caster, so I'm going to turn into a giant avatar of Saren Ray and hit them with a flaming sword. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's perfectly fine. But, yeah, it's a beat stick fantasy, and that's... I don't want to say people don't want that, but I do feel that it's a bit simplistic, and there's not much they can do without putting a lot more effort into these spells than you get out of them anyway.
Yeah. And
especially with Avatar.
I've said before that there is potential for a battle form spell for wizards that still gives you spell casting. Like, I'm not sure what that would look like. I need to kind of experiment with it a bit more. But
yeah.
Vessel spells. Now, these are the spells you get from your operations, and you can only cast these when you're aligned with it. One of the things I really want to point out with them, though, is all of them are one action.
Yeah.
And this just kind of, like, highlights how good the channeling, like, being able to switch out your operations with one action. Because they're all one action.
Yeah,
so you can quite easily cast your Earth's Bile from the Volcano Spirit, switch to, and then use your channeling stance or whatever to switch your operation, and then go into Embodiment of Battle.
I was going to say, I thought that you weren't... was there a stipulation somewhere that doesn't let you sustain it
the spell if you change apparitions.
Oh no, there probably is, and that's fine. But it's a case of you can still cast 2 of your vessel spells in one turn, and just
it's
your
stupid
second
good.
one.
Like,
your second
absolutely.
one is the one that you just maintain.
Absolutely, no, it's still stupid good, and like that's kind of what I like about it though. Like it definitely is the sort of, like I said, the apparition merry-go-round I think is incredibly fun, and I really want them to lean into that for the final version. So they're on their way to that. And I like a lot of these spells too. Like Earth Spell is good. I've used, like I said before, I used the Darkened Forest form, which was cool.
Yeah.
You know, Witness Ancient Battles, like I said, I love a Gish, so we're all down for that.
It's a big focus dump, but also kind of cool. Yeah, no, it absolutely is. Especially at first level, you use both of your focus spells in the first round. But you can sustain most of these spells.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's kind of it for the Animist. I would like to talk about it more, but we kind of do have to.
Yeah, and we've got a lot to say about the next. Like, you think we're sort of like talking a lot about the Animist, but oh boy, Exmplar. There's lots to unpack here.
So obviously Maui, we get that.
Yeah,
and we can kind
like,
of.
I will say for what I'm about to say about this class, like the Iconic is cool.
Yes.
It's a very cool design for this.
But
and like I said, Wayne Reynolds is freaking out because he doesn't know what to do with all that exposed skin.
All right, let's do this. Okay. Rarity, rare. We know why. Exmplar, pretty much. You have a divine essence within you. You can move it around icons and things like that. But let's go. What was your hot take?
Oh no, I mean it's got nothing to do with the rarity. If anything, I think the rarity is
Oh, the rarity's fine.
The rarity's fine. Like, here's the thing: a lot of people are saying like, "Oh, this class is going to encourage main character syndrome." I'm just like, we already have a class that does that. It's called Fighter. Like, Fighter
I was
is already.
Say Magus.
Well, Fighter and Magus definitely has that, but I think Fighter. But I think Fighter is definitely, like, to me, the class that exemplifies the main character syndrome problem the most in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And I say that as someone who really likes the Fighter as a class in this game. The problem is that what it is it's the perfect combination of sort of a very easy to pick up and play class, has the sort of the main character aesthetic of being like, because, you know, a heavily armored martial warrior has always sort of got the default main character, and it's high damage. Like, that's the other thing, too. Like, you could have those two, but then that fits Champion as well. I don't think Champion suffers from it as much, because Champion is a very supportive-heavy class that looks after its allies.
Yes.
It has to, by default, not be selfish to play effectively. Whereas with damage classes, it's very easy to be like, I'm the damage dealer, I'm the one who's carrying the party, you guys gotta back me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. And so, in many ways, I don't give a shit that this class has main character syndrome, because anything that comes up with this in that regard is already being exemplified by the Fighter.
Yeah, and look, when it comes down to it, the main character syndrome thing, that's a table discussion thing.
Exactly.
That's something you have to deal with as player side when you're as a GM. You have to talk to your players, or as a table, you have to talk together and be like, "Hey, dude, you need to dial it back a bit. This is a team sport."
Yeah, exactly. Also, Sean's pointing out anti-paladin and defiler would like to know your location. Yeah, but here's the thing: they can't be main characters because they're evil.
Yeah.
That's the downside. Like, it's like, no, we can't be the main characters because they're the baddies. Like, you can't be a main character if you're the baddie. They are absolutely, like, selfish classes, but, like, in the most pure sense of the word. But yeah, especially Defiler, Desecrator. Sorry, not Defiler. But anyway, to the actual hot take. So
yes,
we've discussed this a little bit.
We have.
So I'm just gonna put it out here to start with. I don't want to say I'm unimpressed with this class, but I really feel this class is unnecessary as it is designed at the moment. And I think the reason that is because it feels like everything in this class... Like, alright, so at the end of the last stream, I sort of went on about a concept I call just another martial, which is a codified thing, like I talk about. Imagine all those words capitalized at the start. Yeah. Like, it's literally the idea that I think one of the biggest design issues I see recurrent throughout Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is not a core system issue, but just a design issue in terms of what content's been added, is that I feel that Paizo has a tendency to unnecessarily add classes that don't really add to the game, in the sense of like it's just creating another martial that it could just be an archetype or some other system that is implemented on top of another martial.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, to this point, I think they've done a very good job avoiding that as far as what classes there are. I think the biggest, like, the most egregious examples of that you see are things like Swashbuckler, Inventor, even Thaumaturge to an extent. Thaumaturge is an extremely popular class, but I remember reading it first and like it took me a while to sort of settle in on it, because I read it and I was like, this is just a martial, but it's got a cool implement. After a while, I did realize it's got more meat to it than that. It's got like it's a very good class. Like I'm not as enamored with it as a lot of other people are, but I can completely see why, and I think it's got enough to stand alone on its own. Swashbuckler is probably the most egregious class at the moment when it comes to that, in terms of a class that I don't think is 100% necessary, but I do think it's got enough of a unique niche that it's like it's like a mobile disruptor with an emphasis on skill actions, which is something that a base fighter can't do, which is the class it gets compared to all the time, of course. Which is like a base fighter can't do by default.
Yeah. Whereas after having a player that plays a swashbuckler, it's much more closer to the rogue. But yeah, this class
is absolutely like this could have been an archetype class.
Yeah. Okay, so if I was to summarize the Exmplar in a couple of words, I would say this is Relics, the class. Like, so much of it is just Relics, kind of redone, repackaged, however you want to put it. And it's basically a class in which you just kind of get given your relics. It sets some interesting precedents for design spaces, because it's kind of accepting the fact that some classes don't function without certain equipment. But
But the problem even then is like you could have a lot of this without the equipment as a standard.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I'm sort of looking at. Like, you look at a lot of the icons and you sort of go, like, you look at things like the I'm just going to look at the icons to see what we got. Like I'm going to look at one that I actually like, just so we can sort of use as an example. Skybearer's Belt. So this has got a very cool ability, which is like, you use two actions.
Let's go down to it.
You stride up. It's on page 24, if you need a reference.
24?
Yeah. Right, sort of down at the bottom of it. So it's a belt. Standard gives you allowing all allies within 50 feet to carry more bulk. You but your allies can attempt to disarm, grapple, shovel, trip creatures up to 2 sizes larger. So it's a free Titan Wrestler for starters, which isn't particularly impressive on its own. The action is cool. You move with the speed belying your strength. You stride. Any point you're adjacent to a willing ally, you can pick them up and deposit them into an adjacent square. That's actually a really cool ability. I really like that. This is just a barbarian feat. Like, this is not something that you need a belt to get. This is something that you could literally just chuck onto another class, and this screams barbarian to me. This is like, this is like, you got friendly toss. This is friendly carry. Yeah.
Well, I agree, but also from my point of view, this feels like something you would get from a mythic level.
Yeah.
Like, this feels like a mythic ability. Like Princess Punchface in my Abomination Vaults game, I could absolutely see picking this up as a mythic thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for starters, like, I think, like, and I will say, like, that's one that I do like. Like, I like the I like that ability, but a lot of them I just don't really care for. Like, look at stuff like, Eye-Catching Spot, for instance, which is right at the top, page 22. Your beauty becomes supernaturally enhanced, distracting foes, imposing a -1 circumstance penalty and melee attack rolls against you. The action is must succeed a will save or be fascinated to you until the start of next turn. Condition ends if you use hostile action, which is standard. Not if you use a hostile action against their allies. So that's a bit of a difference. Yeah, again, like, I don't know, like, a lot of this stuff just doesn't feel like it justifies its own class.
Well, like, it's gonna be difficult, because we are gonna run out of time, so we're not gonna be able to go into as much detail as we need to.
Yeah.
But there are some things, like, people have already pointed out with the Exmplar. So we'll scroll back up to it. They're trained in light armor, trained in non-armor defense. They don't get medium armor. I would like to see them swap defenses with the Animist.
You're just you've got really strong feelings about that medium armor thing with Animist, and then you look at this being like,
Just like, this feels like a class that would really benefit from medium armor, especially with the key ability scores and everything else like that. I could absolutely see a breastplate made of whatever material you like. Some comments from chat though. Sean, I disagree personally. I think it does well as a class. The archetype treatment would have made the concept quite underwhelming and bloated feeling. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the mythic stuff comes out and how much crossover there is.
See, the opposite. I feel the opposite, to be honest. I feel it's bloated as a class, and I feel like things like this would be like very cool to have on top of something like a fighter or a champion. Like, I feel it's like because I like the general combat flow of this. I like the general idea of having your imminence and transcendence and all that sort of thing. You get your items you use. You can only have one active at a time, and you use your action to switch it. I like that sort of flow, but I would much rather see that as like an archetype on top of an existing class, or have it as like an item system.
Yeah.
Like, you can like invest in your icons. You may only have and you can have them like still as invested items. They still take up your investment slots, but then you like use an action to activate them, and you can only have one icon active at a time. That means you can power budget it to make it a little stronger than the average invested item and give you these cool abilities. Like, stuff like that to me would be very cool to see on existing class. I don't feel it on as a standalone thing, especially at the moment. I feel the class is a little too bare bones and too sort of focused on this, that it doesn't have much else interesting going on.
Well, I think that's kind of the kicker for me as well. I know that the icons and the eminence, because just as the brief overview for it, you have the Spark of the Divine. This is your eminence. You can transfer to one icon at a time, and only one of your icons is functional at the same time. So this is the entire kind of gist of the class.
Yeah.
And like, from the feat build for it, there isn't much that actually works outside of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the thing for me is, like, you look at a lot of the feats too, and like again, like, there are some very good ideas in here in theory. Like, you have things like Twin Stars, like, which lets you get, like, if you got a one-handed icon, you can split it, basically turn it into two weapons. You get a exact replica, and thematically it's different. There's one which is basically, that's quite literally like the Thor Marvel Mjolnir thing, where you drop it on top of an ally, on top of a creature, and you can just get it to say stay, and no one can move it. Like, stuff like that is thematically cool. But again, like, I feel this is, like, to me, I feel this is something that you could have on another martial, and it would just, like, you have that. I don't know if it would be with mythic rules. I don't know whether it would be with items or with just an archetype. But it feels like I don't want to get a class just to do this.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
And Ninzad actually brings up a really great point. First, to your point, he's like, it's like if an inventor was encouraged to shift invention type every turn. And that is a good point. The other one, my first impression was that this is Soulforger flavor. And absolutely. I didn't think of that, but you're absolutely on the money there.
Yeah, and I will say,
Soulforger as a class.
Me and you, Matt, have had this conversation about Soulforger before, but like, the Soulforger is a very cool concept for an archetype. The problem is that as it is at the moment, it's incredibly bare bones. Like, it's got like 4 feats or something, including the dedication.
Behold, like, I give you the meat.
Yeah, it's really, like, it's, again, this is one of these things that Paizo does that does annoy me sometimes. It's like, they come up with these really cool baseline concepts, and then they give you like 4 feats for it.
Yeah, and then they drop it, and you never hear about it ever again.
Yeah, although Firebrands has given me hope, because it did give more meat to some of the ones like Celebrity and Dandy that were a little lacking. So I've got hope. I got hope for that. But yeah, like I said, it's this. Look, this is one of those things that I feel is going to be like, I feel this is going to be like a very love it or hate it concept, because like, as you can tell through like comments like Sean's, like comments like that aren't the only one I've seen where people say, man, I really enjoyed this class. It's like,
and look,
like, there are some people out there who really like it.
Even, I've been talking to people, and there's been a lot of people like it. I think look, this very might just be the case of we both don't like it.
It could absolutely be that. And look, we're just two people with our own podcast, so at least your podcast, and I'm gymming in on it. But but I think for me, like, this is kind of what I was hoping not to see, and this is my big fear through like just another martial class. It's like, it feels to me like we have this very robust chassis of existing classes that we can impose these ideas on without necessarily breaking the balance or without having these things feel superfluous. And I feel with this class, like I was saying, like, one of the reasons I will admit, one of the reasons I am very salty about this one as well too is because like I've been holding out for a Divine Gish for some time, and like, this is what I mean at the start of the stream when I said, like, we're not going to be getting anything Divine related for a couple of years now, probably. So, like, this is going to be our one chance to get our proper War Priest or Inquisitor or whatever. So they're putting it off. And it's like, okay, like, fine, I'm happy to wait, whatever. But I guess to me, the thing is, like, I would be fine with something like this if this was, like, the big gimmick for, like, a Divine Gish class, for instance. Like, if this was, like, a War Priest style, like, oh yeah, like you're a martial caster, you're a martial half caster, and you get like bounded divine casting or something. But this is your big thing. You get all these relics you can use, and like you can channel between them. It's like, yeah, it feels like if this was like on top of something else, on top of sort of a more I don't want to say identity, because the identity is very strong, but mechanically it needs a more meat to it. Like, the idea of the demigod sort of class has a lot of potential to it. But I just feel that this is just sort of a glorified archetypal item system that, I know I'm sort of saying like a broken record here, but could have just been on top of another class.
Yeah.
So, or at the very least, even if it's not on top of another class, this should have been on top of something else to go with it.
Yeah, and look, because Sean said, I'd say still that it's good as a class. Of course, mythic mechanics are purely speculative, but there are expressed differences in both feel and function to legendary, godling, and divine spark, fighter, wizard, inventor. Oh yeah. Look, we don't know what the mythic rules are going to turn out as. I want to say, like, you'd get one icon, because my current suspicion is that the War of Immortals Adventure Path, whatever it'll be called, will do a similar treatment to what Strength of Thousands did, in which you have your core class and they gave you a free archetype, but you were very limited in the choice. You had to either be druid or wizard. So
absolutely.
So I think for the adventure path that they'll have come out, it'll be a case of you can be whatever class you want. Here's your free archetype. It has to be Exmplar.
Or it's going to be mythic.
Or it's going to be
That's what
mythic.
I reckon. Oh, it's going to be mythic. And here's my suspicion too. My suspicion is that the mythic rules are going to be very heavily based on Exmplar, and Exmplar is just going to be like the general play balanced version of that.
Yeah.
So that's my suspicion. Like, and that's, I'm sort of on two sides about that. Like, I feel, again, this is one of those things where if that is the case, I'd be a little more understanding. But again, this is classic Paizo, sort of putting the cart before the horse and not explaining things and letting people
speculate,
letting people doomsay before they see the full picture. Which I will fully say, like, I am saying all this with the full expectation that this is absolutely a playtest, that this is absolutely not showing the full scope of what this source book is going to be, and obviously as a playtest, it's going to change possibly substantially between now and the final version.
And
so I know all that, but that's the reason I'm being sort of very, very, forward in my opinions of it at the moment, because obviously, now's the time to have those opinions, and then once we're waiting for a year for this class, then I can shut up and wait till things happen before I start seeing the final result.
And that's pretty much what a lot of this does come down to. And like we said earlier, this might just be a case of this class does not resonate with us.
Yeah,
like it does with a lot of other people.
Yeah, I think
Power
in
budget
many
of
ways,
what goes into a class and archetype must be the deciding factor here. That's also the other thing to consider as well.
Oh, absolutely, and I will say I do understand that too. Like that's something I did actually say to someone else when discussing this just today. In fact, that I realize that a big part of this is the fact that having it as a dedicated class means they can bake the entire power budget of this into it, and not have to worry about like. And I think we had that conversation last time too, talking about like when you make an archetype, you have to consider every class. You can't just consider one.
Yes.
So yeah, I do absolutely understand all that, and it's probably in many ways much easier to have that. I guess my sort of fear is like the best way I can describe it is when I talk about like just another martial class, and like when I talk about what my concern is, I don't want a game that becomes overly bloated with samey options.
Yeah.
That kind of just because we said this last time. 1E was sort of heading that way.
Yeah.
Towards the end of its life cycle. I can see it a lot in other games I've played over the years. It's like, I play, in like MMOs, for instance, like you get to that point where like every single DPS class ends up having like no substantial difference because all they're doing is they're just releasing classes for the sake of releasing classes. And it's like, well, this class has like a slight difference. It's like this one's like slightly buff focused, or this one's slightly not buff focused, or this one's like got a healing gimmick or something. And it's sort of like, after a while, there's only so many concepts you can bring out before everything becomes homogenous.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm scared of happening with second edition. I don't think it will, to be fair, because I think second edition has a very robust chassis and is very good. Like having a class like Exmplar come out will not invalidate fighter or champion or anything else like that. Like it's not going to do that. Those classes will still have their own niches and all that. Like I just don't know where Exmplar is going to fit into that, and I feel it's sort of heading a bit sort of. It's almost a little bit fightery in how it is sort of like you get to build your own martial, but it kind of has the god flavor instead of the mundane martial flavor.
Yeah. Which
and I'm not.
I think that's part of why the rarity tag's there as well. Because, like I said, it very much has a lot of the feelings of build your own martial.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why I find the lack of medium armor proficiency quite weird. I know someone in the chat pointed out the fact that most legendary heroes did not, wear any armor, if at all.
Yeah.
But there's also tales of a bunch of heroes who did wear armor, and they were known for their armor.
Yeah, I will say too, like one of the things that I said this to you yesterday. Oh, was yesterday or today? God, time's blurring at the moment. About how I actually find that quite interesting. The thing I do find interesting about this class is the sort of the starting from humble origins sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So it is the thing like it isn't martially trained. It has like the simple weapon boost where it increases the dice size if you just give it a simple weapon. Like literally my playtest one that I want to chuck out to at Pathfinder Society next week or the week after is literally going to be a gnome with a frying pan.
Yeah.
Damien told me I have to call it Gordon Pansley, so like that's gonna be the character.
Weirdo says, ignoring actual mechanics, a lot of it reads like it's made for folks that struggle to theme a character around the choices they make. Well, that does play into the Exmplar a lot as well, because there are definitely, without specifically having a subclass, which does have something along the lines of a spellclass with its epitaphs and things like that.
Yeah.
But it definitely has this idea where you have a ranged option, you have a up close and personal combat option, and then you have like your Dexy twin weapon style, which is what you get with the Twin Stars, for instance, where it splits a one-handed weapon icon into two.
But also, I was looking into it. There's nothing that really synergizes with Twin Stars as far as two weapon goes natively. The only thing I can think of is using the Mjolnir feat to like drop one of them on the opponent, so you can keep the other one while you're still attacking with that.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I can think of for that one. I mean, there might be something else I'm missing, but
The one thing we might absolutely be missing here is the fact that because there are a lot of similarities to other martial classes, they could have feats in there in what eventually occurs as the full build for the Exmplar. We're just not seeing them because that's not what Paizo wants us to test. They want us to test the icons as they are. And I completely understand it if that's the case.
Yeah, exactly.
If we're just missing the feats that aren't here.
Yeah, I'm just reading the chat. When does it stop? Somewhere!
Yeah, it's a bit like that. I mean, like I said, Paizo's been very good this edition with like not bloating out content. So
Yeah.
I'm giving them a bit of a break. Like I'm not saying this is doom and gloom or like the start of anything bad, but like I do feel like I said, a big part of this is saltiness about the fact we're not getting our Divine Gish, but also like it's I do worry that we will sort of in like 5-10 years time get to that point where it's like, are we getting another martial? Do we really need two classes a year? I don't think so.
Well, I know when the Inventor came out, there was a rumor going around that I don't think it was ever actually substantiated, but there was a rumor going around that said that Paizo were like, these are the last 2 classes. We're not going to do any more.
Yeah.
That rumor, of course, has been proven to be untrue. But yeah, there is an underlying like concern from the player base, and I'm amongst it, and I think you're there as well, Dan, where it's just kind of like, at what point do you stop with the classes? Like, every class has so much going on with it in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and it's...
Yeah.
When does it stop? Like, when do the ideas become kind of mediocre or just remixes of already existing ones? And it's one of my concerns with the Exmplar.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, it's like... like, I think for me, like, the thing is twofold. The first is like I said last week, like, I was probably not going to go as, like, have my expectations set as high anyway for this set of classes after Kineticist, because I feel like that was peak class design. Like, that was absolutely a class that I feel like was Pathfinder 2nd Edition reaching its potential. And I think in many ways, like, you know, I'm one of those people. It's like, if you like have like the band that releases like the banger album that changes your life, you're like, right, I'm lowering my expectations for the next one. They can have just a generic, it's good, not top tier album after this, because, you know, lightning doesn't strike twice often.
Yeah.
So I was totally ready to go there, but this is sort of like the exact opposite end of the scale, where it's like, this is my worst, this is my worst expectation for what I was hoping we wouldn't get. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the problem is twofold in that. Well, the first thing is that obviously, like, you don't want to release too many classes because that does bloat out the game.
Yes.
But the reality is also that classes are the big content releases.
Yeah.
Like, it's marketing 101. It's like, what's going to sell the most, like, when you play, like, when you've got a hero-based shooter or MOBA or something like that, RPG, what's going to sell the most? It's a new hero or a new class or something like that. Then it's going to be skins. Then it's going to be whatever. Like, the new player options, particularly the big flashy ones, are always going to be the draw. So I understand that there's a marketing incentive to keep pushing out new classes. What I would hope they do is that they think very carefully about how they do that, so that they have something like, you know, the Kineticist being one class for the year, that they just sort of, you know, really nailed down. That to me was like a very good both marketing and design decision.
Yeah.
I really want to see them do more of that. I really want them to look at it and see, what does this game actually need at this point?
Yeah.
And really drive into that. I don't want to see, like, classes released for the sake of being more classes, because that's when you start to get content bloat, and that's when the game starts to get a bit sort of... Like I said, I don't think 2nd Edition's at risk of becoming homogenous, because it's not like a game where they constantly shift the mechanics around. But I can see that...
power scale.
Sorry?
No, there really isn't a power scale either. Like,
there isn't.
Everything is so well balanced that it's really hard to actually have a power creep, is probably the better term, where it actually breaks that.
Absolutely, and that's actually one thing I really respect about 2nd Edition. There's not much power creep, and Paizo is very strict about that. Even with things like the remaster, they're not power creeping out of control. They're letting loose some things they need to for quality of life changes.
And that's what people were ignoring anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
From chat, rather than a new class, I'd welcome a sweeping archetype overhaul, which has plenty of potential to sell flavor to new customers. Look, I think we've already started to see that coming through in the more recent books from Paizo, like the Splat books we've been getting. It's rare that you see a one-page archetype anymore.
Yeah.
And I think having them as at least a 2-page archetype is just going to be the minimum standard from now on.
Yeah, I will say too, like, because again, me and you have had these discussions ad infinitum at this point, but like, yeah, like archetypes are to me the sort of the real like classes of the chassis. Archetypes is where the real modularity comes in from the game. And I will say too, one of the things that I think is sorely underutilized, which again, you know this, Matt, but I haven't said this to other people much in public, is class archetypes. Class archetypes to me, there's so much untapped potential there. I've got so many pitches for class archetypes that I think would really help flesh out the classes in a way that diversifies them without completely needing to create a new class.
Yeah.
That I think that's something that Paizo is sorely underutilizing. If anything, I get the impression that they're almost scared to do it. Like, I feel they kind of like had a big push in Secrets of Magic, and those ones are just so bad. They were just like, okay, we're not going to do this again. And it's like, no, guys, you got this.
You got this.
You're in the right direction. Like, even looking at the revamped Elementalist in Rage of Elements, that is so much better than the Secrets of Magic one. So much better.
Because you bring up the class archetype, the one that really stood out to me in Secrets of Magic was the Rune Lord archetype, and everyone just kind of looked at it and was like, "Oh boy, okay, this is what we're doing, huh?" And it's just like there's so much more potential to it, but it just
there's so much potential to it, and then they just also like it was just really. The flavor was cringy in places too. Like just the whole you have to commit acts of your sin to regain your focus point, and it's like, hey, Lost Rune Lord, what are you doing in the corner over there?
Yeah.
It's like, do we really want to go down this route, guys?
Like we did that with Pathfinder First Edition, and people did not like it. And honestly, that was a slightly side topic. I'm really fond of the idea of the Exmplar deals extra spirit damage and that it can game features to swap that out with other damage types. Yeah, I saw that as well. I can see the Exmplar working really well with the Thaumaturge, for instance, because the Thaumaturge can basically be like, they're weak to this now. And the Exmplar can be like, hey, I can do that damage. Let's get in on that and do extra damage.
Yeah.
Which would be really cool. Class archetypes are a delicate balancing act. I've worked on a couple, and there's a lot to consider that with repercussions of minor changes to the class score. Yeah, I've been working on, in the background, a shifter class archetype for the druid that kind of drops out. It turns them into a like a wave caster, similar to the Magus or the Summoner, but gives them more uses of their battle form. And yeah, it is a delicate balancing act.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good thing. I've got a couple. I should probably show you Sean's. Sean's very good at this sort of design stuff.
Absolutely.
For the people who don't know, like he is one of the big brains behind a lot of the balancing stuff that's gone on with in Sinclair's. So it's he's a very got a very good intuition of the game design. I've grokked him out for a couple of my own things, and yeah, he's extremely good. We are very lucky to have him.
Ninzad says, which might inform how much they're willing to do with that kind of transformative archetype. Yeah, no, that is very true. Because the balancing act is there, and a lot of the classes are so tightly balanced. I think with the remaster, and even some of the internal restructuring they've had at Paizo, we might see a few more class archetypes. Like I said earlier, I don't think we're ever going to see another one-page archetype. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I do really wish that they sort of lean into using archetypes as a big push for their content design more. Like, the two things I look at when I look at the new Splat these days, first thing I look at is, especially the big releases, like Rage of Elements, etc., is, like, first thing I look at is classes, of course, because that's the big one. Mm-hmm. Second thing I look at immediately is archetypes and subclass options. Where
is the archetypes? Show me the archetypes, yeah. No,
but basically.
It was one of the things I was disappointed with Rage of Elements, because it's like, where's the archetypes? I want to see archetypes. Where are they? No? Okay. I was very satisfied with spells, though.
Yeah, I was very satisfied with spells. I was actually very satisfied with the other class options we got, because we got a lot of cool things like the elemental pets and things like that.
Yeah.
Like, there was plenty of meat in Rage of Elements. Like, I can't complain too much about it, but I do feel it's sort of a prime example of Paizo not leaning into the strengths of like, again, this is the thing that annoys me. It's such a good design. Like, so much of the system is really well designed, and there are just times when I feel like Paizo sort of can't see the forest through the trees that they've grown themselves.
Well, there is another side to that discussion, and it's the fact that Paizo was well aware of. We're going to go into a little bit of TTRPG history. I do apologize, but back in like the TSR days of D&D, there was a problem where the company itself couldn't create enough content to keep up with demand. In order to answer this, they were like, okay, we need to help out. We need to give third-party publishers a chance to kind of do what we can't. And that was the origins for the OGL originally. It was like, you can use this license. It means we can never sue you for using our stuff, but it means you kind of create content using our chassis. I think that might be the direction that Paizo's going in. Like, maybe not purposeful design holes, but just leaving space there for third-party products to kind of come in and kind of just expand on what they're kind of already shown, if that makes sense.
I think, and like, I'm very excited to see like what will come out of the third-party space in the next couple of years, especially with the current push. Obviously, like, Battle Zoo was sort of like the big sort of third-party project at the moment, just because that is the brainchild of one of the actual lead designers of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So, like, Mark's always going to bring out some very good content for that. Like, and like, I can say this, like, I'm a little biased, obviously, because I've been working with Sinclair's, but like I said last time, like, I one of the reasons I'm happy to work with you guys is because I'm legitimately very impressed by the quality of the content and the kinds of content you guys are coming up with. Like, it's legitimately, I think legitimately it's going to be like a mover and shaker in the space, and I hope that it gets the attention it deserves. Not just because not just because I'm getting content in. Like, the Almanac, for instance, I think I've got like one thing in that I can put my name to. So like, I have no stake in that. But like, what I've seen in the Almanac is extremely, like, I'm going to be looking at that and looking at things and pointing to my players going, you can use this if you want.
And look, there's, just to briefly touch on some of the Sinclair stuff going on, a lot of it is at the moment is just hurry up and wait. We're just waiting on things to come down the pipeline. But that's not to say that we've been idle. Like, there's I've said it on my stream a couple of times now, there's a bunch of projects that we have in the pipeline that we just don't want to announce yet. We want to show that, hey, here's the book, here's the Almanac, it's good to go. Then we can start announcing our new projects. We do have stuff that's in the pipeline. It's just we're getting there.
And in the end, like, you guys are a small, like, independent third party publisher, like, with an absolute skeleton of a team. So, like, you aren't working on Paizo time here.
No. Though we have learned a lot of lessons from the Almanac and the Codex, which we will be bringing into future projects and stuff like that. But back to the Exmplar, because we are running out of time.
We should actually talk about the topic again.
We're good. Don't worry about it, Sean. We understand. You're cool, buddy.
You're fine. You're fine, Sean. Don't stress about it. We got people, like, there's so much content for Pathfinder at the moment. People can wait for it.
Like, once again, we have learned lessons for the entire process. We will be applying them to future projects. So it's a bunch of lessons learned. It's just a lot of frustration at the moment, and we understand that.
Exactly.
We are a team.
Exactly. So with the Exmplar.
Yep.
Sorry, I thought you were going to say something.
Well, look, we've said a lot about the icons and stuff like that. Because there are a lot of icons. Like, the chunk of it is the icons. But I'm trying to get to where we have the epitaphs.
The epitaphs are, again, like,
this is where the Exmplar kind of stands out on its own, because it does have these kind of, I don't want to call them spell classes, subclasses, but it's kind of there. For instance, Brave makes you trained in athletics. And after you spark transcendence of your body icon, your body carries you forward, allowing you to stride up to half your speed in a straight line towards one enemy. Like,
Yeah.
this is where the class starts to stand out on its own. It's just feels a shame that we have to wait until 3rd level for it.
Yeah. I think, for me, I think someone said earlier it's sort of got that, it's almost got that thaumaturge feel where it's got, like, a couple of, like, layers of that sort of personalized customization.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's sort of what they're going for with a lot of this. And I will say, like, trying to sort of look at it in good faith and not just accuse someone of wanting to make the OP god class.
Yeah.
Or self-insert god class, I should say. I think, to me, it does seem like they've sort of, like, it almost feels like they've looked at Thaumaturge, seen how popular that is, and have gone, we've got something here, let's try and do it again.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways it's, I don't know if it's like, because again, I could be completely misreading this. It almost feels like that's what's happened, and they're kind of wearing the influence on their sleeves there.
Yeah.
But I feel in many ways like, yeah, at the moment it's not appealing to me in that sense. It's not really winning me over in terms of what this has, because like I feel like this is all very sort of like fluffy stuff that, like, especially like the epitaph, like I feel that the epitaphs are things that you could have just as like a storytelling point to have your character get.
Yeah.
And like I get that the whole point of this is that it integrates mechanically. But again, I don't know, like I feel it's almost a bit too light and fluffy in that sense. I don't know.
Oh no, I get that.
Yeah.
Sean brings up a good point. I think it makes sense. You don't start your journey with fame and title. Level 3 seems right. Yeah, as you kind of gather your deeds, and it ties a lot into the story of your character as well. And I do get that. But it's just, I don't know.
I guess like to sort of, because we're running on time, and like sort of to wrap to sort of start wrapping it up and getting to the point, so I'm not just like doom and glooming. It's like, well, this class is a write-off, I'm not going to enjoy it. What I would like to see with the gathered feedback, and what I would like to see in terms of placating me specifically, because, you know, my tastes are the only ones that matter. But in terms of what I would like to see, I think thematically, the idea of the sort of demigod / divinely influenced like superhero class, I'm not against that thematically. And like I said before, I don't think there's any point mulling over it in terms of the rarity and in terms of the main character syndrome stuff. Because, like I said, I think
whatever.
Yeah, well, because it's whatever. It's whatever, and I think, like I said, classes like Fighter already embody a lot of those problems anyway.
If you're going to have a player that has main character syndrome, that's going to happen regardless of the class.
Yeah, and there's already classes that do that. It's like you're always going to have like the edgy characters who want to play the thieving rogue. Like, you can't not include class because of that. And also, I love those kinds of concepts. So like, and I'm not an edgy player, so like, don't cut that out just to stop the problem players.
Oh.
But I think for me, what I really want to see is that I feel mechanically at the moment, it doesn't really pop. And I think what they really need to do is to tap into like what is truly unique about this divine spark, again, about this sort of like demigod hero fantasy. Because I get what they're going for with the thematics, and I think it's not actually a bad idea. I love that sort of like idea of like the heroes like Hercules, Maui, all those sorts of like kinds of like I said before, it's almost like that sort of like humble upbringing where they realize, oh, I'm actually secretly blessed to be super powerful. Like, that's pretty cool unto itself. But I really want them to tap into something that's unique about it, that doesn't feel like it's sort of derivative of other things. Like, I don't want this to be like, oh, this is just Thaumaturge implements, but with divine god stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that they could do, and this is me just kind of spitballing the idea, is they could have a subclass decision at first level that's pretty bare bones, and it's just a case of where does your divine spark come from?
Yeah.
Are you the distant relative of, like, sorry, I won't say distant, because that's a sorcerer. Are you like the son or daughter of a god? Have you had a divine encounter? Like, where does your divine spark come from? And from that, you can be like, okay, so you have these two skills and this choice of a first level feat. They do it all the time with the other classes. They could do it here pretty easily.
Yeah. I think in many ways there is something interesting about sort of the divine influence having some sort of tangible impact in a way that isn't tied to the icons specifically. Like it's like the one I'm thinking of off the top of my head now is is like Achilles. Because like the whole thing with him is like he was dipped in the fountain, but because his heel was the part that was covered, that's why his heel was the weak point. So little things. So little things. So I think in many ways, like maybe that's it. I think maybe that's the problem. Maybe there is like something there in terms of the influence being almost like, I don't want to say completely sorcerer-like, because like obviously we already have sorcerer for that.
No, I figured it out. I figured out what my problem is with it.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas tree.
Yeah, I see what you mean. What you mean. Like it's a lot of different hanging parts that don't really come together.
So Pathfinder 1, there was this huge problem with what was known as the Christmas tree effect. Like when you were playing a martial class, you weren't your class, you weren't your individual. You were what items were attached to you.
Yeah.
And that's what this is reminding me of. Because your icons are your ornaments.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And I think sort of saying it out loud and realizing, the problem with me isn't the fact that I don't like the concept, it's that it's so heavily tied to these icons.
Yes.
The icons are what feels superfluous. I think, and obviously like, it's going to be a hard balance, because I feel like in many ways that's sort of what's drawing a lot of people to them.
Yeah.
But I also feel that, I was saying this to someone else too, again earlier today. I feel there's a very fine line when like the class's identity is tied inherently to its items. It's almost what the problem that Inventor and Thaumaturge almost but not quite have is.
Yeah.
It's like I feel like you could have like the Inventor innovations be like part of another class. You could have like the Thaumaturge implements be part of another class.
Yeah.
It's just only by virtue of the flavor of the class sort of saying no, it doesn't work with other people for specific reasons. That's true with this as well, but I feel in many ways it's kind of missing the point of what makes someone who is divinely blessed with this power have. And I don't think it's necessarily the goal should be necessarily to remove icons, but I don't know if that's really where I want the focus to be.
Yeah. Sean says the iconic got his powers from a demon attacking him. Yes, and I would like them to lean into it more.
Yeah, and your icons are sound ornaments, so anyone else picks them up, they are. I'm assuming that's normal. Not Jormal. Jormal. I know. I'm just thinking jorts for some reason, but divinely blessed jorts.
Please don't fight the jorts.
Yeah, but like I said, I think in many ways, I'm not against them having that as a class feature. But the more I think about it, the more I'm sort of leaning towards it should be a part of the class, but not the center of them.
Yeah. Like,
that's my beef. Like, I would almost love the idea of like, you can have the class that like does something like, oh, I've got like, I can do like a super powered leap because I'm, the son of a god of flight or something like that.
Well, and I think that's what they're trying to get across with the body icons, because they're not actual items; they are actually a part of you. But it's just, it's one of three, and it's like Thor didn't start off with Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Maui didn't start with his fishhook.
Yeah. And in fact, it wasn't the whole point of Moana that Maui found out that the real strength came from within and not from his fishhook.
And there's the 20th level feat for the Exmplar, which basically goes, where is it? A place beyond mortality. No, it's the cutting without blade.
Yeah.
While tales of your divine archons have spread far and wide, you realize that as they are all manifestations of your soul, the object itself is unnecessary, and you can just kind of manifest your icons. That is a perfect capstone for this class in particular. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Even if it's something super simple, like here's a skill, like you're trained in this skill. Hell, let's throw it out there. You're also trained in medium armor.
Mm.
But just something that kind of reflects the fact that you've had this divine encounter or this divine thing has happened to you. And that's what the body icons are. I'd also have to assume there will be unarmed icons eventually too. Yeah, and look, as we both, Dan and I, have said a couple of times here, we are also not getting the full picture. Yeah. There might be feats here that we're just not seeing.
Exactly.
It comes so close.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think the sort of, and especially sort of like actually constructively discussing what I think is wrong rather than just bitching about it.
Yeah.
I think I'm sort of beginning to see like where I could see the potential for the class to really sort of tap into what that fantasy of that divinely blessed character is. I just feel at the moment it's very... I don't like how tied it is to the icons.
Yeah.
And I feel it needs to tap in more too. Almost a bit like that capstone feat, like that sort of realization of, oh, your power is completely internal. Like, what does that look like?
But this is part of the reason why I would like something similar to the epitaphs, but at first level. Even something just really simple. But I've already said that already, so it's fine.
Exactly. Also, Leo has just said, Dan, please let our campaign loot some booty shorts called the Jorts of Decimation. We'll get into homebrewing that.
Is that usually what happens?
Yeah.
If there are unarmed icons, I'm making some from Kung Fu Hustle. Yeah, no, look, the Tianjia Adventure Path Season of Ghosts is coming out later this year, I believe. Like,
oh no, I just realized the tongue from Kung Pao is an icon.
Oh god.
Oh no.
But yeah, I think with the Tianjia book that's coming very soon, we're gonna get a lot of exemplars in there. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. If I do run Season of Ghosts, I won't be running it publicly though, because I would be way too embarrassed to butcher all those names. Because I'm seeing it, even looking at Ruby Phoenix, I'm like, that's a lot of names for me to mispronounce, and I have enough trouble with English.
Yeah, we really need someone of East Asian descent to do that, because we will just white boy that shit.
Yeah, so badly. It's one of the reasons why I didn't do Strength of Thousands, because it's like, you know what? I'm just gonna step back and let someone else do that.
Yeah, I know there's some wonderful African content creators within the Pathfinder community who would be absolutely willing to do that. So please do that, and we will give shout-outs.
Oh, but we don't want weebs at the table to correct us. Well, at the table is fine, but when I'm talking about like streaming and stuff like that,
everyone is in Bleach. Okay, this conversation is over now.
I mean,
we're done. It's past 10 o'clock, Matt. I gotta go to bed.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think a lot of, well, as a final point, people have been saying for a little while now that Paizo seems to be leaning into the JRPG feel of things and like the anime feel. I think this is just the next step in that. When it comes down to it.
Well, I mean, this is basically going into the JRPG feel, but moving away from JRPGs and just going into every other culture RPGs, which is really what we should be doing. Because there's many great cultures that aren't just like completely Eurocentric or Japanese-centric.
And to their credit, they are getting the right people in to write this content as well.
Exactly. Reminder, I am very excited for the Tianjia book.
Yes, I've seen the list of people involved in that project, and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
But Dan does bring up a good point. We are 5 minutes past the hour, and I can't stay until 11 p.m. like last night, because I do have another stream in like 12 hours.
And I have a day job, so I need to sleep at some point.
Yeah. Isn't that always the way? So we will close it up there. Thank you everyone for joining us. The VOD for this will be up on YouTube in about 24 to 48 hours as per the rules regarding Twitch and me being an affiliate. I do have a Throne up. If people aren't aware of what a Throne is, it's a kind of wish list where people can contribute money. At the moment, I have most of the stuff that I have up there is to create more content. And the command's not working great. But currently I have up for Gatewalkers, the Foundry plugin for it, so I can actually run that on stream in the future. Otherwise, if you're looking for any TTRPG supplies, check out Imaginary Adventures. I'm not sponsored. This is not an official affiliation or anything like that. It's just I like Imaginary Adventures. I reached out and asked for a code, and Damien was kind enough to supply me with a 15% off code. So all you have to do is put in Obscura Tabletop when you check out, and it'll give you 15% off your first order. This is most helpful for people who are in Australia, of course, because they have their Australian-based retailer. But I'm assured that it works for people in America as well.
Yeah. Also,
Otherwise,
just a quick shout out to, in regards to Imaginary Adventures, we do play regular Pathfinder Society games there on the weekly, so if you are in the Brisbane area, and particularly in the south side, please come by. It's a very cool group we've got going there, and we would love to get some more people involved in playing some Pathfinder.
And to kind of piggyback on that, speaking as someone who kind of has a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look for a Paizo, because I'm technically a content creator / partner, Paizo does pay attention to the retail stores that are running PFS. So the more people who are running PFS, the more people who are going for that store and buying products. It's quite literally a whole thing of the more that it's used, the more Paizo is going to put effort into actually supporting the local industry there. And that's something we would love to see in Australia.
Yeah, and fun fact, if you buy stuff at a Pathfinder Society game, you actually get bonuses you can use in that game, which we only discovered the other week.
If you spend $10 in-store that night, you get a free resurrection, I think it is. Like, if a character would die at the table, they just don't. And it's like, okay. That encourages sales and things like that for the chocolate bars and the drinks and things. Otherwise, I will be back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Let's Build a Super Dungeon. We are going back to it. I'm not sure if I'm going to be continuing with Dungeon Draft or if I'm going to be doing some experimentations with Dungeon Alchemist, which is a more advanced program that I've been wanting to have a better look at. And I feel like a full stream with other people telling me, to do wrong things will actually be really helpful with that. Otherwise, I hope you have a good day, a good night, a good week, no matter where you are in the world. Be sure to check out Dan on Twitter at DanTalksGames. Otherwise, I think that's it. I think we're good. Well, remember, as always, we will raid someone. But remember, as always, we are the storytellers. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Sleep tight.